Good morning, everyone. Glad to see everyone's here, looking healthy and safe. I see our numbers are creeping up, so we all need to encourage vigilance as we've been doing for some time. Mike, if you could take a roll call, please. Hello?
Bear with us. We're okay. Councillor Moffat.
Present.
Warden Danielson.
Present.
Councillor Roberts.
Present.
Councillor Kennedy.
Present.
Councillor Burton.
Present.
Councillor Ryle.
Present.
Councillor DeVolen.
Present.
And Councillor Schell.
Present.
Thank you.
And if I could have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda, please. Councillor Roberts, Councillor Kennedy, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that the October 14th, 2020 Haliburton County Committee of the Whole agenda be approved.
All in favor? Carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Hearing none, we'll move on. We have no delegations. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of September the 9th? Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the minutes from the September 9th, 2020 meeting of Haliburton County Committee of the Whole be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? Thank you, that's carried. We have no correspondence, so the first department is roads. So Councillor Burton, if you could take over, please.
Yes, thank you, Warden. I presume Craig's on. Yeah, Craig's here. Public Works Status Report, October 2020. Craig.
Good morning, Council. Okay, capital projects. Just an update. The Hawk River Bridge is, I think, a little bit ahead of schedule. Should be open next week. Surface treatment, frustrating process. They are saying they'll be finished this week with the surface treating work. And then there's a just sweep and get those lines on the road. Eagle Lake Bridge, contractors doing great work, just very slow. It will remain with the eastbound lanes open, and then we'll get it open to sort of 2-lane traffic for the winter, and then come back and attack the westbound lanes in the spring. It's always a bit of a challenge when the weather gets cold. We don't want to be pouring concrete or doing a lot of asphalt work. So, so that's the status for Eagle Lake Bridge. Operationally, speed signs. If you've come in through Haliburton, you see the radar sign in front of the high school. Later this week, we're going to move that over to the other direction out by Tim Hortons, sort of the most popular spot for it. Just as a side note, we've got about 20 locations that sign has visited thus far. Maintenance-wise, even though we're in a situation with COVID, staff are very pleased with the work that they've done. The stars have aligned with health, knock on wood, and the equipment is not breaking down on us. So we've had a great year for getting work done. Just more recently, the rail trail has been brushed from the south end up to Giza Road. They'll go back and do some hand brushing just to clean that up a little bit. Currently working on guide rails and some hand brushing around some of the key intersections. That's a quick update. Any questions?
Questions, Andrea?
Thank you. Just back to that radar sign, and we've talked about this before and what we were going to do with the data. It came up at Dysart's Committee, the whole meeting yesterday. Request for slow and the whole issue over speeding came up, and I just wondered, do we ever come up with a plan, or what are we sharing that information with OPP? Is that data recorded, other than telling the individual that they're going too fast?
Yes, we collect the data and look at it. And if there's significant speeding, by all means, we share that with the OPP. And yeah, we've checked back a number of times just to see what is what they consider to be speeding versus something that's a little bit more normal. Yeah, so it by default it collects all that for us, so it's great.
Other questions? Warden Dennison?
Yeah, Craig, I just wanted to ask about the paving projects. There had been some concerns raised in the northern part of the county about excess tar. I just wondered if you'd had an opportunity to talk to the contractors about that.
Absolutely, not just in the north, but down in Highlands East as well. With the moisture in the air, the tar does not set up as fast, and so yeah, it's getting on the bottom of our trucks. We have a spreadsheet essentially with all of the complaints that are going to Miller, and they're being very good at following up on their end to make sure that things get cleaned up on the bottom of all the vehicles. Yeah, but for sure it has been a problem.
Thank you.
Other questions? Recommendation, Mike?
Did you a mover and a seconder for it?
Sorry, I did not. I was going to do it after, but moved by Councillor Moffat, second by Councillor Shell.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that the October 2020 status reports on capital projects, operations, and road maintenance be received for information by Haliburton County Roads Committee of the Whole.
All in favor? It's carried. The pre-approval of 2021 tandem axle plow truck purchase. Craig.
Okay, thank you. As you can see on the report, the first chart there showing the 10-year replacement plan, plow trucks are required at one per year for the next 8 years. This is in keeping with our long-term strategy to replace trucks when they're about 9 years old. A plow truck is required in 2021. There's a long lead time to purchase these trucks. So staff would like to order the plow truck as soon as possible to ensure that the plow truck is actually ready for next winter. So staff are asking that pre-approval be granted for $283,000 and that staff can initiate this purchase as soon as possible.
Questions? Pretty straightforward. Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, is that a price that you've sort of received from a supplier, the 283, or is that a guesstimate kind of a?
It's based on past purchases, and yeah, so I think it's and then we're increasing it every year with inflation a little bit. So
okay, thanks.
Other questions? Someone move the recommendation. Councillor Kennedy, second. Councillor DeVolen. Mike?
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor DeVolen. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole recommends to Haliburton County Council that a tandem axle plow truck be purchased as part of the 2021 budget allocation, and that Haliburton County Council Committee of the Whole recommends to Haliburton County Council that pre-approval for the purchase of a tandem axle plow truck for 2021 be granted.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Green Fleet Policy. Craig.
great, thank you. Staff are pretty excited about the next two reports. Last month, Council approved the Corporate Climate Change Mitigation Plan. With 82% of the greenhouse gas emissions coming from our fleet, staff are anxious to take actions to reduce fleet emissions. Two goals in the mitigation plan are one, to reduce fuel consumption, and the other one is to transition to low carbon vehicles. So the Green Fleet policy addresses both those goals. The main items addressed in the policy are one, idling, and the other one is how we purchase our fleet. So with respect to idling or the anti-idling, staff reviewed a number of other municipal green fleet policies and have arrived at what we've got here as a draft. Essentially, gas vehicles, we are wanting maximum idle times to be 1 minute, and diesel maximum idling times to be 3 minutes. Of course, there's a number of exceptions that we've noted in the policy. For example, cold starts in the winter. We want to make sure the windows are cleared before they drive away. So regarding fleet purchases, three-prong approach, right size the vehicle, smaller the better, typically, low emission, such as hybrids, and finally, that life cycle costing be carried out for these purchases. Of course, tradition is we recommend purchases based on low price, but the Green Fleet policy will require life cycle costing, which will include operating costs for the entire life of the vehicle. Life cycle costing is important for the transition to low emission vehicles because they tend to have a higher upfront cost, but a smaller operating cost. Having said that, the Green Fleet policy notes that consideration be given to vehicles with significant greenhouse gas reduction potential, even if the lifetime operational savings do not fully offset the initial cost. I'm not going to go through the policy in detail, so I'd like to take any questions that you might have at this point.
Questions, Brent?
Yeah, just a comment. It's a great move. And even apart from a green initiative, life cycle costing is a more sophisticated approach. And even things that don't seem to have this, a more holistic view at purchasing things is a great move. So I'm in support of this and very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat?
Thank you. Yeah, I support this as well. I wonder if we can circle back on, I think what we touched on at a previous meeting. Sorry, I've got some funny light here in my room. Around the location and the cost of charging stations that would be needed. And remind me if we had talked about having charging stations available for public use with a priority for municipal vehicles.
So that's certainly in the plan. It's not something that we are addressing in this particular policy. So if at this point, if we've got a plug-in hybrid vehicle, for example, does not need a charging station, it can plug into just a 120 volt or at the office or at home and whatnot. But that's another item on the list that we're not addressing right at this point, but we have our ear to the ground in terms of grants and options for that. So that's something I think that the county and the four municipalities should be working on together.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Roberts?
Well, because you went with Councillor Moffat first, actually, that was exactly my question, was about the charging stations and the availability of how it can facilitate with the public. So I asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ryle?
I too think this is an awesome program, and I'm going to assume for the sake of argument that ambulances have their own program.
Sorry, was there a question asked there?
Yes, I just want to confirm that ambulances have their own program.
Oh, ambulances. Yes, we're working with them currently for their next vehicle as well.
Other questions? Andrea?
But just to clarify, though, what he said is but about the idling. So this is only for public works vehicles because ambulances, because of the medication that they keep inside, et cetera, have to stay at a certain temperature. So the whole policy only refers to our public works department, correct? This policy.
Yeah. Yes. 99% emergency vehicles. Yes, they're exempt from the idling, but maybe they're out and they shouldn't be idling if they're not, if they're not on duty, let's say.
Other questions? Someone move the recommendation. Councillor Roberts, second. Warden Danielson, Mike.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Warden Danielson. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives for information the October 14th, 2020 report on the Green Fleet Policy, and that the draft Green Fleet Policy be forwarded to Haliburton County Council for adoption.
All in favor?
I have a question.
Question?
Before we take the vote, I'm just wondering if we shouldn't make some comment within the policy that does exempt or address the issue of emergency vehicles. Just because, you know, when the public sees a policy and they see, you know, that an ambulance is idling and you know, don't realize that there's a difference. Can we include something to that?
I believe we do. Exemptions, it says emergency vehicles and equipment while engaged in operational activities.
Sorry.
All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you.
Good job, Mike.
Purchase of SUV right sizing of fleet vehicles. Greg.
Okay, again, the county's corporate climate change mitigation plan led to the Green Fleet Policy, which includes the purchasing of low emission vehicles. So here we are. The 2020 equipment purchases included 2 pickup trucks. Only 1 truck's been purchased so far. Since there's an opportunity to right size and purchase a low emission vehicle for the second vehicle in lieu of the second pickup truck. Staff are recommending that the pickup truck be replaced with an SUV and further that a hybrid vehicles be considered. So on page 2 of the report, compliments of our climate change coordinator, we provided a chart of life cycle costing, starting with what would have been status quo purchasing the pickup truck, following down, comparing that to a standard non-hybrid SUV, comparing that to a hybrid SUV, and finally comparing that to a plug-in hybrid SUV. So not surprising that the vehicle efficiency improves as you go down the list, and our annual gas usage drops as well as you go down the list. The next chart is just relates specifically to greenhouse gas emissions. And not surprisingly, when you go down the list from a truck to a plug-in hybrid SUV, the greenhouse gas emissions drop as well. Just to provide some perspective and sort of order of magnitude, our goal is to reduce the emissions for fleet by 15%. By replacing a pickup truck with a plug-in hybrid SUV amounts to 7% of that target. So that can be a little bit discouraging. So this highlights the importance of the idling policy and the purchase of in the future of low emission vehicles. So we have to remember that our decisions today, they impact us for the next 7 to 10 years in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So, so finally, staff are recommending the purchase of an SUV and further that it be a hybrid SUV, and that we carry out that purchase next month.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. So unfortunately, it says that the Ford model is not available till the spring or summer of 2021. And just in light of the fact that there is a Ford dealer in the county, I just wondered was this something that we could wait on? And because it didn't even get into the comparisons, or is the need for the vehicle immediate and we'll cross that bridge next time we need to purchase a vehicle?
Well, I think maybe I put that back to council, whether because we'll be purchasing vehicles next year, so local supplier can certainly get on board, or we can wait. I think there'll be other suppliers as well that come online in the summer. We were sort of discouraged at the number of hybrid and plug-in hybrid vehicles, SUVs available in Ontario. They're available in the States and they're available in Quebec, but we really had to do some fact checking to actually confirm that they were available to us. So my preference would be to purchase it and move on, but that's, I mean, that's just sort of a personal recommendation, but if council would rather wait until next year until some other options open up. Having said that, when more competition comes online in the summer, there's no guarantee for a local supplier either. So it's a tricky question.
Brent?
Yeah, I mean, the move to an SUV and a hybrid, absolutely, I'm in support of. You know, dealer support, and I'm not picking on any particular brand here, so I won't name anything, but just dealer support and availability of parts. Not all vehicles in support of them are created equal. And I would just, as a cautionary note, when we're considering any of these hybrids, that the amount of them that are in the market and dealers that can support them and the parts, because it's pretty specialized stuff that are in support of that would be considered. Obviously, the things with the lowest targets are admirable to do, but there are other considerations that if we have challenges in support, that would be my only cautionary tale from spending a couple of years in the car business.
Anyone else? If not, there's, could I have someone move the recommendation? Brent, second. Warden Danielson.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Warden Danielson. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole recommend to Haliburton County Council that the 2020 purchase of a pickup truck be replaced with the purchase of a hybrid or plug-in hybrid electric SUV, and that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole recommend to Haliburton County Council that staff formalize the procurement of a hybrid or plug-in hybrid electric SUV.
All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Okay, the winter maintenance agreement with the city of Kawartha Lakes. Craig.
The County of Haliburton has winter maintenance agreements with both the County of Peterborough and the City of Kawartha Lakes. With the City of Kawartha Lakes, we have an agreement that is coming to an end for a 10-year term. Haliburton plows the short section of County Road 503 coming out of Kinmount. It's more economical for our crews to do this since we're driving over it anyways on our way to do our route east of there on 503. It's a small monetary amount, but it's essentially there to formalize our responsibility. The agreement is, the new term is 5 years. And I'd be remiss noting the climate change commission or considerations right now because we are driving over it. It's not a special trip. So this agreement reduces greenhouse gas. Any questions?
Questions? Have someone move the recommendation? Pat Kennedy, second by Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat, that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole recommend to Haliburton County Council that the County of Haliburton and the City of Kawartha Lakes enter into an agreement for winter maintenance on County Road 503, and that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole recommend to Haliburton County Council that the winter maintenance agreement be for a term of 5 years with automatic renewals thereafter, and that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole recommend to Haliburton County Council that a bylaw be presented to authorize a winter maintenance agreement with the City of Kawartha Lakes.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. We have nothing under EMS, so we will turn the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, I'm not. Thank you, Madam Warden. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to do this. I'd like to fall back on the electric vehicle charging stations and ask that Craig maybe start to initiate with our climate change coordinator, looking at more in depth into this. There is a grant out, I understand right now federally, that includes electric charging stations going forward. I don't know the exact details of it, but perhaps it's a time that upper and lower tiers look together to move forward with that initiative. And I'm just not sure if this was the right place or not, just to try and get it on. I know it's not on the agenda today, but I think it's an important item. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor DeVolen.
And in that regard, if you're considering doing it at the county, make sure you talk to your neighbors at Minden Hill. We might be able to do something together collaboratively.
Excellent.
If I might, I just would say that that was one of the first items on the work plan for the joint municipal committee that's coming up. So it's absolutely something that will be on our priority list for sure.
Good to hear. Councillor Moffat.
Just quickly following up on the CAO's comment, what's the, I can't recall what the reporting status is for that municipal working group. Will we see that monthly, or how often are they meeting, and how will we keep abreast of those discussions and potential outcomes?
That's a great question. I'll one of the challenges with with Zoom meetings is that our director of planning, Mike, would you be able to allow Charles E. in to answer that question? We're just bringing the director of planning in to answer that question.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you, Warden. With regards to the working group, the idea is that reporting will come through myself following those meetings, and the meetings would be held quarterly with the county and the local municipal staff who are participating in that meeting.
Any questions, comments? Thank you, Charles E.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to finance and IT, and we'll turn the meeting over to Councillor DeVolen.
Thank you, Warden Danielson, and good morning, Elaine. Yeah, and things are moving around on my screen. You're here. There you are. Yes, and if we would start with the first item, which is the check register for September 2020.
Okay, good morning, Warden and councillors. The check register for September 2020 totaled $2,913,333.77.
All right, any questions or comments from members of council regarding the check register? Seeing none, can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Moffat, Warden Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Warden Danielson. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives for information the staff report on the check register for September 2020, and further that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council that the check register for September 2020 with checks, EFTs, and PAPs totaling $2,913,333.77 be hereby approved.
You've heard the resolution. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. The next item is the payroll register for September 2020, Elaine.
So the payroll register for September had 2 pays and totaled $454,795.29.
Any questions or comments with respect to that? Seeing none, can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Roberts, Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives for information the staff report on the payroll register for September 2020, and further that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council that the payroll register for September 2020 with net direct deposits totaling $454,795.29 be hereby approved.
You've heard the resolution. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, and the year-to-date actuals as of the end of September.
At the end of September, we had spent 73% of our operating.
We've lost your audio, Elaine.
Okay.
Your mic. Oh, you're back there now. Yep, go ahead.
Oh, at the end of September, we had spent 73% of our operating expenses and 46% of our capital. To date, we've spent 72.82% of our annual budgeted levy, 9/12 to 75%. So we're running on target for the end of the year. Included in the costs above, we have $295,000 of COVID costs, which we do have funding to cover.
Great. Any questions or comments from council with respect to that report? Seeing none, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Warden Danielson and Councillor Shell.
Moved by Warden Danielson, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives for information the staff report on the year-to-date revenue and expenditures as at September 30th, 2020. And further, that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council that the year-to-date revenue and expenditures as at September 30th, 2020 be hereby approved.
You've heard the resolution. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you.
And if you'd promote the Director of IT, or I suppose if the Director of IT can promote himself, maybe. He's in control today. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Councillor DeVoe.
And we'll start with your IT status report, if you would.
Sure. So this is just my standard status report that I deliver every month, just giving the overview of projects we're working on and some individual stats from the help desk and how things are performing. There's really nothing in here that I necessarily need to bring to council's attention this month. So for the sake of expediency, I won't necessarily go through every page unless, of course, there's a request to do so, or if council has any specific questions for me.
Any questions from members of council on the IT status report for this month? Seeing none, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Warden Danielson, Councillor Moffat.
Before I read the resolution, I'd like to say I'm a little concerned about your direction to allow Mike to promote himself, because the only position above him is mine. So I'm a little worried he'll take you up on that. But moved by Warden Danielson, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that the Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives for information the October 14th, 2020 IT Department Status Report.
You've heard the resolution. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeVolen. Next, we have Planning and Environment, and I believe it would be over to you, Councillor Burton.
Okay, thank you, Warden. Draft official plan amendment number 1, policy discussion. Charles E.
Good morning. Thank you very much, and I will go right into it. At the August meeting, we had a discussion about a number of different items where our official plan policies could be updated, some being required because of changes to the Planning Act, and the provincial policy statement was also updated in 2020. There's a number of other areas where we had discussion about making some changes or changes to direction with regards to what good land use planning may look like in the County of Haliburton. And I was directed to do a little research and bring back a number of items for discussion to Committee of the Whole. So I've included attached to my report a chart which outlines each of those areas where I received direction to follow up, find some background information, and propose some policy language. And so I was thinking we could go through each item on the chart, and if there was any questions or comments, we could discuss them individually, because the topics are not necessarily directly related to each other. They're general policies that can be found throughout the plan. So the way that I've organized this is I've listed the topic or the area specific to the discussion, whether or not we currently have an official plan policy section that either relates to this topic or is to be updated because of a change. And I've provided that current policy if it does exist. And then new proposed policy, you'll note new language is identified in the color red, and the black is what we currently have. So the very first item is tiny homes. And you'll notice all of the proposed policy is red because we do not currently have a policy in the county official plan or any of the local official plans with regards to tiny homes. This is a new initiative that the province has provided some guidance, they've created some background information and documentation, and have outlined what a minimum standard would be should municipalities wish to move forward with allowing tiny home development in their jurisdiction. So what a tiny home is, as defined and outlined, is a small self-contained dwelling that has a living area, a dining area, a kitchen area, a place to sleep, as well as bathroom facilities. And what I would like to be very clear about is we're not talking about the types of tiny homes that you may see on certain television programming, where they're on wheels, where they can move around, where you can travel from Newfoundland to British Columbia. That's not what we're talking about. The province has outlined what a tiny home needs to meet in order to be a permanent dwelling. So there's building code requirements, fire code requirements, servicing requirements that all go along with the development of a tiny home. What it is really a smaller footprint, which supports the county's goal for new and alternative affordable housing options within our communities. You'll note later on when we talk about housing policies, I've identified that a tiny home could be individual on its own independent lot. So theoretically, that could be a new plan of subdivision in one of our communities with services, where you have multiple tiny homes making up that subdivision, or it could be an existing vacant lot with private services, where a tiny home could be the primary use on that property. As well, because of the size, it also could meet the requirements for an additional residential unit on a property. So where a person has an existing dwelling, and instead of creating what we commonly refer to as the garden suites, they could, as of right, put a tiny home on the property, again, as long as it meets specific requirements as outlined both by the building code, fire code, and in this case, municipal zoning. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to discuss, and I'm sure there will be questions.
Brent?
So is there any differentiation for tiny homes between in-town lots and rural in any shape or way?
Yes. So what I would be looking to County Council to identify is where they feel this is the most appropriate, because the main difference will be servicing. So in some of our settlement areas, we have full municipal services, which means if you have a lot, whatever the size of that lot, you can connect to sewer and water. Hydro's probably at your line. You probably have school bus service. Your road is maintained year round. You have all of that. Some of the rural lots, if it's it's going to be the primary and only use on that lot, then that development of a tiny home would require servicing. So that's a well, that's a septic, that's hydro service coming in. So there is a servicing difference, and it may not be the desire of council to have tiny homes in all areas. So we can have that discussion of where it is appropriate, and it may be most appropriate because we're looking at it as a permanent dwelling, as an affordable housing option, that council may wish to consider having it only in settlement areas or only where there's servicing available.
Yeah, Warden Dennison.
A couple of questions and comments. I'm wondering first if the building code has laid out regulations with respect to tiny homes yet. They have, okay. Personally, I have a real issue with 118 square feet. I think that that's too small. You know, I'm quite sure that we can, well, I'm not positive, but I would hope that we could find some midpoint that might be more acceptable to us all. And I'm also not sure about best land use of placing a tiny home on a town serviced lot. But that's just something that I'd like to see us discuss.
May I provide a bit of a response?
Certainly.
So the size of the tiny home, that's the minimum size that it can be. It can be no smaller than that. And that is outlined by the province. Should council wish to make that larger, so that 17.5 square meters is 188 square feet. If you wanted to make a minimum lot size or a minimum tiny home size 200 square feet, I mean, the policy will be in the plan and the local municipalities will be looked to implement that through their zoning bylaw. So if it's on a proposed town lot with full services, you may have different zoning requirements and minimum sizes versus in a rural lot with private services. And again, that would be to the local municipality to identify in their zoning bylaw.
Okay. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. I definitely support moving towards smaller footprint homes to address some of the needs that we have in our communities. I do have a preference for tiny home communities being in settlement areas. And I wonder if the first change, sort of mindset shift, is in changing the name. Tiny homes, I think, stands us in good stead for confusion. The tiny home movement is very different than a smaller footprint home for affordable housing purposes. And I think we could go a long way to solving our own interpretation problems if we stopped calling them tiny homes and called them smaller footprint homes. And I know it sounds like maybe that's splitting hairs, but my concern is that, and I did speak to Charles, actually, we had, quite a conversation about Sunday afternoons on HGTV. We're trying to provide housing and provide more opportunities for different sectors of our community. And I think that if the public just reads the headline, Haliburton County allows tiny homes, there may be a misunderstanding or confusion around the requirements for servicing, building code, a limit on the number of sheds you can have, that kind of thing. So I think there's absolutely room to have greater opportunities for housing for smaller footprints, but I think calling them tiny homes, regardless of whether what the province calls them that or not, I think is problematic in a lot of ways.
Thank you. Cease?
Yeah, I have a concern too about the size, the physical area of a tiny home as it's defined with 17.5. I mean, if you look at that, that's basically 10 by 18. If that's the external area, that means if you're building to the code, you got a 6-inch wall, then the inside of that building is going to be roughly 9 feet by 17 feet. That's half the size of the living room that I currently have. And you're trying to put all that stuff in there. So if we were to go with that, would that become the minimum that all municipalities would have to accept? Or can each municipality raise that number slightly depending on what they feel?
So my understanding is that's the minimum that a home could be compressed to size-wise. I have a question out to the ministry to see if exactly if the county council wanted to go at 20 meters squared, if that is appropriate. I believe the answer is yes, in the way in which I have read the ministry documentation. Again, you could set that in your local municipal zoning bylaw. I am waiting confirmation, but again, the way that I read the documents that are out there, yes. You could have I'm just going to pick an example, the township of Minden, the Minden settlement area, it may be appropriate to have smaller footprint based on the servicing available and the type of development, whereas in Highlands East, you may, in your zoning bylaw, require something larger. Still within the idea of a smaller footprint home to make affordable housing for everybody.
Councillor Shell.
Thank you. I had similar thoughts to what Councillor Moffat had said, and I think, it's semantics, but when you say tiny home, I too think of the HGTV show, where it's wheels and it's movable, and I think maybe labeling them as something else would be a wise move for the county. And back to what you had just said, Charlesy, about, depending on the municipality and size and stuff, I actually would prefer to see this be at the county and be the same across all of the municipalities, but that would just be my preference.
Sure, and for both of those items, both with the name and having a standard across the county, I take my direction from you. Consistency is always a good thing, and we can include that here. So I look to committee for direction on that.
Brent?
Two things. I agree. If we can have a standard across the county, that would be my first choice. And I'm not challenged by the number, but a slightly higher number. So that if we're all on the same page, I would definitely concur. And I just had a word suggestion that is micro housing. Again, labels count, and that we can quickly say that micro is not to be confused with tiny. As that just, anyways, just a thought.
Good, thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. So Dysart just underwent a comprehensive zoning bylaw, and so this discussion came up. And we actually reduced the minimum size of a dwelling in Dysart across the board in all areas to be 600 square feet, which I know is still not in the neighborhood of what we're ever calling tiny or micro. But we felt for consistency, we had some areas where it was 6, some areas where it was 7, and some areas where it was 8. So we felt comfortable with that. We talked to our building official and asked how many people are actually coming in and asking for, a 400 square foot home, not a bunkie. And it's very minimal. I think we have to be careful. We're not the same as some of the areas where these have been more popular. Our land is really precious here. There's only so much service land. So I really caution reducing a whole lot more than even 600 square feet. In terms of other units, such as apartments or condominiums, we have them even smaller. And Pat, I'm not sure if you can remember offhand the number of the minimum size of a unit. I think it's somewhere like in the 400 and for that would be like in a condo, in a multi-residential.
Warden.
Algonquin Highlands is looking at their zoning bylaw as well, and that's an item that we're definitely looking at. I'm kind of wondering, and I know that we're going to have a hard time zoning in on exactly what we agree on, but I would look more to a 400 square foot, which is kind of a midpoint. I believe that there will be a greater demand for smaller homes as people can't afford what's available on the market, can't afford to build larger homes. That to me, 400 square feet is a really good midway point between the traditional tiny homes that we've been seeing and something that is a little more modest than 600 or 700 square feet. But we haven't made any decision yet on that in Algonquin Highlands.
Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. And I wonder too if the start at the other end and say, what's the purpose? Are we just offering people a smaller place because it's all they need and it's more affordable to build on your lot, wherever it may be? Or are we looking at this because we want to help the aged or the vulnerable or the underemployed, who by virtue of our housing studies and everything we've learned probably need to be more near a town site with access to shops and services. And so if we peel it back and say, what's the purpose of this? Then that might help us come to that conclusion. Because I think a tiny home or a micro housing community in a village situation is ideal for housing solutions. A separate issue is a lifestyle choice on out on a rural lot, or we're saying no for waterfront. But I think that there's a difference there too. So we need to be very clear about what it is we want to use this for, which I think is helping those folks who really need the help with housing opportunities and options.
Councillor Rao.
Just to throw another wrench in the gears. First off, I really like the term micro. I think let's nail that one right solid. But I'm wondering if we could have the differentiation between a micro house and a micro apartment, or equivalent to a multi-dwelling, because one does not necessarily have to be the same size as the other, because standalone might bring up some building challenges, whereas part of a larger complex may not be so bad.
Charlesy.
Sure. If I could maybe answer a couple of the questions that I've heard from Councillor Roberts, Councillor Moffat, and Councillor Riel. The first, with regards to whether or not there is a significant demand, I can say that one local municipality wrongfully was added to a tiny home province-wide website as being one of the only places in the province where tiny homes were permitted. And for at least 10 months, the phone at that municipality and at my office was ringing off the hook because it got out there for some reason that one of our municipalities was allowing them, and the demand was was a lot. It was significant. So I think if council makes that decision to move forward, I think you will see demand right off the bat. So I agree that yes, a standard and coming up with something countywide will make that process easier for all of us, for all of the municipalities. And we always have to think long-term when we're talking about why are we considering this. And as I stated, I'm considering this and recommending it as a permanent housing solution. And right off the bat, maybe we don't offer it available everywhere. Maybe it is focused by policy to settlement areas. See how it goes, see if it takes off, see if there really is that demand. If there is, then it's something I'm more than happy to bring back to County Council with some numbers and some data and say, you know what, this is an option that people are looking at, and it actually is costing X number of dollars to build these, which is affordable, because we know in the county provided by our housing provider what affordable is, and maybe we need to see what those numbers are and think long term. And then the last question about minimum size and whether or not it's the same as an apartment. They are different, both under the code, under zoning, and under planning. So I'm not sure it's a fair comparison. And I would definitely have to look further on the minimum apartment size. But what I'm talking about specifically here is an individual separate structure that's on its own.
Warden?
I think that we're going to be seeing different types of applications when it comes to this sort of property. I'm quite sure that there will be young people who want an affordable home, but they want a more traditional lifestyle, that they might want to build a micro home on a rural property. And that would, that would meet one need, but there's also the need for, as Carol said, people living close to amenities, older people or people on low income and they don't have transportation. So we might have to find a solution where we did maybe allow a compound of some sort or like a micro community, I think Carol called it, which I also think is a good idea and a good use of land, especially if we're going to be using serviced land. I see at some point we will be talking about what lot sizes would go with, let's call them micro homes. So, I'm interested in hearing that discussion as well.
Councillor Moffat?
Yeah, and the other thing too, when this issue first came up, I had done a whole bunch of reading on it, and one of the things to be careful for, not that, in a way, we are telling people how they can, use their land and spend their money. We are sadly a society driven by consumerism, which means everybody has a lot of stuff. So there are very few people who can actually really successfully live in micro housing by its strict definition. And one of the other concerns that I think we need to have regard for is, where are you going to put your stuff? So you're going to have a shed, and then you're going to have 2 sheds, and then you're going to have 3 sheds, possibly, because unless people are choosing a micro housing option because they are less driven by consumerism, and a lot of people are. And so, Charles, you pointed out to me yesterday that, of course, the building code and local bylaws would restrict the number of sheds, because what you don't want to have is someone, the development of a smaller footprint house and a garage and 7 sheds. You could have just built a house. So how do we ensure sort of that we're back to clean and clear, and how do we ensure that the community stays vital and tidy and not disorganized? So just one more piece of the puzzle in considering this, and I'm sure that we'll hear lots from the public about their thoughts on it. There's no question that this is a popular idea. I want to circle back and say we need to make the decision whether we're trying to do this to provide housing or a lifestyle choice, because they're very different things.
Charlesy?
And to add to the comments from Councillor Moffat, if it was to be restricted or directed, let's say directed to settlement areas, if these micro housing developments were to come forward, they would be required to do so. Same planning process by plan of subdivision, which would have site plan in association with that, where those controls could be put in place. So, you know, 1 shed in addition to the micro house on each individual lot, and it may provide a greater control. But again, I put that to the committee. Should I create a little more direction in the policy, and when all of these items come back to council as part of a public meeting where we will have members of the public providing their input, we can discuss that further.
All right, Councillor Moffat?
I can't remember, Charlesy, I apologize, our question yesterday. I believe I asked it at the Algonquin Highlands discussion about housing footprints. We are limited in the ways that we can raise money to run municipalities. It's through property taxes, which is primarily based on assessment, which again, the nesting dolls is primarily waterfront. However, is there any validity to the fact that tiny homes or smaller footprint homes mean smaller assessments, which could reduce the amount of taxation that municipalities need to raise to buy things like single axle plows and provide fire services? So I don't know if that's realistic, but it has been suggested in the past that allowing smaller footprint homes sort of almost anywhere, except with the exception of waterfront as outlined here, could put a dent in township revenues, which is how we move our communities forward. So just another thought.
Thank you. Councillor DeVolen?
Just the kind of the corollary to that, with the explosion of land values that we've seen in recent years, and especially in the last year, I'm probably less concerned about that than maybe Councillor Moffat, although you're technically, you're correct how we collect our money, that we pay some of our bills, but rapid growth and growth of the aggregate of assessment, I think in the county is substantial and will continue to be so, whether we have micro homes or not.
Thank you. Charlesy?
Okay, so I will pull together the ideas and thoughts for here and bring forward a continued draft policy. The next item is still talking about housing, and we had the discussion about second units, which is the policy we currently have in our official plan, and moving towards what the province is calling additional residential units. So in the Planning Act, it is outlined that additional residential units could be a second unit within an existing dwelling, or a second unit in a dwelling that is being constructed, as well as an additional residential unit, which could be a separate structure on the same property as that primary dwelling. And again, an option for affordable housing, an option for providing an income to help people stay in a property that they're currently in. Also to help care for family members and or children who are growing up, to follow people through that family life cycle. And there's a number of options. Again, this is it's in the legislation, so it's a statute, it's required, but it's not required everywhere. And so similar to our previous policy on second units, there are areas where we should be directing this to. And I look to any comments you may have. This is the second item. And you'll note that there's some black language. So the text that is in black is what's currently in our plan. And I have inserted, based on the updated Planning Act, And if there's any questions or comments on this.
Questions? Councillor Roberts.
Okay, thank you. So it's on page 3 of the section under the minimum requirements for the lot size, etc. And one of the things that points out that the secondary unit or ancillary unit shall not be greater than 40% of the main dwelling. So what if the main dwelling is only 1,000 square feet and a person wants to build a second dwelling and then it's like, but I'm just wondering what the point of the 40%, if someone's on 100 acres, of which I know somebody who actually asked me that about a week and a half ago, and she'd like to build on her parents' property, and it's 100 acres. And so I don't know the size of her parents' house. I find the 40% a little bit limiting.
And so the idea behind an ancillary dwelling is that it is secondary to that primary use, which would be the primary dwelling. You're also, when you're talking 100 acres and you're talking lot coverage, it's not as impactful as if you're in either, the village of Haliburton or the village of Minden, where you have 30-foot frontage lots and 40% can be a lot of coverage, depending on how the original dwelling is oriented on that property. So that's really the purpose behind it. And it's to keep it as a secondary use. And if we are talking in our settlement areas, instead of calling it a secondary unit or an ancillary dwelling, there is options with regards to zoning, where instead you could have the property come forward as a duplex, where you could have a 50-50 split. So in that case, that would then change the use of the property and could be done through a zoning. These are as of right. So I wouldn't need a zoning to put in a second unit that's 40%. But if I wanted to go from a single detached dwelling to a duplex dwelling, which would be a 50-50 or more, I would need to do the rezoning process.
Okay. Councillor DeVolen.
Yeah, just in settlement areas and rural, I don't have a problem. I just, in terms of directing policy, obviously, I don't see a situation to do this on waterfront has any, I certainly don't have any appetite for, I guess is what I would say.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat.
I've tried very hard to keep all my notes here organized, and I have to refer back to my conversation with Charles yesterday. So in this section on page 2, it says this is going back to what Councillor DeVolen just said about the waterfront, shall not be permitted on a municipal land use designation of waterfront. Elsewhere in this document, I think, again, I couldn't find it, under the shoreline section, Charles, is there not a section where we want to replace decisions of minor variance with decisions of rezoning for certain purposes? And in doing that elsewhere in this document, does that open up this? If somebody rezones for a 30-meter issue, can they change the zoning to then allow this on waterfront and then efficiently, or actually then just sort of negate that section?
And so when we talk about planning applications, technically any property owner has the right under the legislation to apply for whatever development they want to apply for. We can advise them that our policy does not support that. However, we will take in an application. The purpose of having the policy is to provide direction to the decision-making body. So whether that is local council, county council, or any of our committees. And the policy direction is really strong. And moving forward, if any of these policies are implemented in our plan, they're to be brought forward and outlined in the local zoning bylaw. So I would say anybody could apply for that today, even though our policies don't allow it. But in providing a professional planning opinion to the decision-making body, we would rely on our policy, rely on the provincial legislation, as well as the provincial policy statement, which may not support that. And as outlined in my report, I believe it was to council, The Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks is strongly behind the no minor variance and having a greater analysis for development in shoreline areas and a greater protection. So we'll see that policy kind of throughout official plan going forward. But anybody could apply right now if they wanted to, regardless of this being in place or not.
Warden Danielson.
Speaking of no minor variances, I quite liked the inclusion of that in several locations, just because, you know, I think that sometimes committees of adjustment are presented with some very, very difficult situations, and this would help some of that. Speaking to Councillor Roberts' concerns about the 40% coverage, I actually thought that the 40% was a fair percentage to be proposing. I was just kind of concerned that we would end up somehow, if it increased, that we would get into the, you know, two primary residences on a property, and that's not something that we want. There's mechanisms to allow another development, yeah, I wouldn't like to see us open ourselves up to two primary residences on a property, despite its size.
And the policies here, as I stated, this is for as of right. So you wouldn't, as a property owner, require a rezoning or a variance or anything. As long as you met the zoning and building code and fire code, these are as of right policies. If you wanted to go up to that 41%, then that would necessitate a Planning Act application. So the goal of these policies is to remove some of that red tape to allow some additional as of right development where people can plan and go in, get a building permit without having to go through that planning process with a zoning or an OPA. And that's kind of the purpose, but we have to put that limit on. And that's where I recommend that 40% would be that limit to trigger. If you want to go bigger, absolutely, you can make an application, but it'll have to be reviewed with a planning analysis.
Councillor Roberts.
So yeah, I just, before I'd be comfortable agreeing to that 40%, I just want to, you know, put some more thought into that because we just talked about the fact that we don't want people to have to go through a minor variance. But, you know, if it is like the instance that I talked about on a 100-acre lot and the person's parents' home is only 12 or 1,400 square feet, 40% of that becomes quite small. So I realize I don't want to, we're not talking about having two equal dwellings on the same property, but 40% seems a little bit small to me.
And when we're talking about an additional dwelling on a property, if these rules do not satisfy what they're looking to do, there is always the option of garden suite. Those are still in the legislation. They're still out there, which could be a separate dwelling. It isn't necessarily following these guidelines because it is a separate process, a separate use, which could be much larger than that 40%.
Councillor Ryle.
I'm going to throw a curve into it. Let's say I own a home, 100 acres, something big, no problem. It's 1,000 square feet. Now I decide to add to it, but I'm going to add a 2,500 square foot expansion, which now makes my primary home my secondary home. Is that legal?
I don't follow that question.
I don't understand the question.
How do I?
Okay, I have a home. It currently sits at 1,000 square feet. Okay, and I'm using the reverse of what Councillor Roberts was saying. Now I want to put an addition on it, but I make the addition 2,500 square feet. So it becomes the primary home. Now, my original home becomes the secondary, the additional.
Mm-hmm.
Is that legal?
As long as you have a building permit, it could be, yes.
Any other questions? Councillor Moffat?
In connection to other conversations, is there anything to prevent or do we have concern that the development of an additional residential unit is not for grandma or a young family, but it's, you know, far enough away from the main house that it just becomes a short-term rental on which is essentially kind of two primary dwellings? Does that matter? I mean, to me it does, and to a lot of people it does, but in the world of planning, which can be very confusing, does that matter?
So we can't govern or regulate how people use the home. That's people zoning, and it's illegal. It's against the law. What we can do is guide and direct through our policies. And I think this policy in particular, we've done our best to not have exactly that situation by not allowing the lands that are designated as waterfront as having these as of right. So we're doing, from a land use planning perspective, the best that we can. And there will always be the one-offs, but as a general policy, I think this is a good way to go. And again, we don't have to permit them everywhere. We have to permit them somewhere. And so we're, through the policy, directing where that somewhere is.
Okay.
Okay, and I will add some of these comments into that section and again, bring it forward for council review. The next item is the prohibition of minor variances to the 30-meter setback. Oh, I see a hand, sorry.
Warden?
I just wonder what you're thinking as we're going through this without actually landing on some, you know, any kind of clearer direction about, for instance, the minimum size requirements where we started, and the percentage coverage. Is that problematic, or you're still good with our discussions? I just sort of thought maybe we would get a little bit closer to directing, you know, what we think is appropriate at this point.
And so I'm welcome if the chair wants to have an actual direction and vote. I have a number of comments. I'm going to build, this is still draft and it will be brought forward as draft, and final direction will be given then. But again, it's up to Councillor Burton. If he wants to delve deeper, I'm happy to do that.
Well, I'll ask County Council, what's your wishes? I don't really have a preference. It can, in my opinion, it can wait till we get through the draft.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to double check before we went further, because there's a couple of things that we're, you know, we are going to need to, well, more than a couple of things that we're going to have to settle on.
And I hope to provide options. So when that comes forward and it is before County Council, not only will you have, it'll be a document that the public will see. I have to provide that to the public in advance of the public meeting for County Council. And I am sure you will have numerous public comments with regards to a number of these items, and it may help to inform your decision moving forward.
Certainly.
Okay, so shorelines and the minor variance, or the no minor variance within that 30-meter setback. So again, when we're talking the official plan, we're talking at the time of new development or site alteration where an application under the Planning Act is required. So these policies affect new development where you have a zoning application, a plan of subdivision, all of those applications. And the direction would be, as proposed in this policy, that where a new lot is created or a new development is created, that in future they could not come forward, or in association with that subdivision, come forward with a minor variance to reduce that 30-meter setback. And I'll give you a bit of background to my logic here with regards to the no minor variance. It was a ministry mod. They've confessed they may have placed it in the wrong section of the plan. So we're bringing it to the actual shoreline section of the plan, where it makes the most sense, in my opinion. As well, with all of our recent discussions related to shoreline protection, lake health, water quality, I would make the argument to the Committee of the Whole and to County Council and local municipal councils that water bodies and the protection aren't just a policy. It's almost to the point of a significant interest to the county, to the councils, and based on the direction that you may be moving forward with, their protection should not be taken away in small increments on individual lots. Because if we have, say, 100 lots on a lake, and over time, say over 10 years, 10 of those lots incrementally have minor variances to move forward and move closer, the cumulative impact of that encroachment on the water body, on the environment, can have a negative impact. So when you just have one minor variance in isolation of itself, the committee or the decision-making body may not fully consider what that impact is. Oh, it's just a deck going 5 feet closer to the lake. Understanding that with some other bylaws, by moving that structure closer, the structure may only be 5 or 10 feet closer, but there's a clearing that is done around that structure, right? So even though it doesn't have a building permit that goes along with it, you have an encroachment of a structure, and then you have encroachment of the destruction of vegetation adjacent to it. Most insurance companies want you to have that separation between your dwelling unit and the vegetation. So there's a number of reasons. And like I said, I think we could make the argument that protection of the shorelines is a significant concern to the county, and therefore minor variances are not appropriate in most circumstances. It's not saying people can't make an application. They can, absolutely. There is a planning process through the zoning where a fulsome analysis and maybe an evaluation of the site is required. And that would take into consideration that cumulative impact on a water body or shoreline.
Brent.
Yeah, I'm wholeheartedly supportive of this. And as I think of the Committee of Adjustment things that I've seen while I've been elected, they're all around the waterfront and in that 30 meters. So I'm very happy to see it proposed that in future developments that we have the option to not allow committees of adjustments to mess with it going forward for all of the reasons that you just stated.
Thank you. Warden Danielson?
Yeah, just a brief comment that I really support this this section as well. I think it will go a long way to help supporting the initiatives that we have for protecting our lakes.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat?
Thank you. And is this the section, Charles E., we were talking about again yesterday, where there would be a restriction on minor variance, but somebody could bring forward as a rezoning application, right?
That is correct, yes. So again, there may be a circumstance due to topography, due to past use of the property where, that, or an existing legal right where that 30-meter setback can't be met. There's going to be situations that occur, and we should have a mechanism, which would be the zoning, to look at those on an individual merit basis.
And if a follow-up, if I may, and this is where I want to link back to the ancillary units that there would be, I'm assuming there would be, would it be like waterfront exemption number something, as opposed to being, if it was permitted for good reason, it couldn't be rezoned to allow a secondary unit on waterfront. There's no, you can't slip in there somehow.
So I could apply for it if I wanted to on my waterfront property, but the policy doesn't support it. So the planning report to the decision-making body would not support it. And theoretically, following that trail, the decision would be not to support it. Again, I could apply for it if I want to. It's up to the decision-making body to uphold the principles that are being guided through this official plan document.
Councillor Moffat?
And so this is what I find is so frustrating about planning, is like, how do we just say no? Like, there's always someone else who will argue a way to get it to the LPAT to get what they want. So is it just simply the way language falls out in planning, or is there some way to make sure that we stopgap some of these things so that we don't continue with frustration for people pushing the limits? I'll stop.
And so it is. It's key in the way that the wording is put in a policy document, because that policy is then supported through the decision-making process, whether that's your zoning bylaw, whether that's other bylaws the municipality has in effect, site plan control bylaw as an example, site alteration bylaw. They all work together. And if the policies of the decision-making body are consistent, should you end up before the LPAT and you have good land use planning rationale and you can support that, then the decision that council or the decision-making body, so it could be a committee, makes would be upheld at that decision-making body. But we cannot stop a person, say like myself, who wants to have some new development from making an application. We can advise them we won't support it, but they can still make that application.
Councillor Ryle?
If I understood correctly, and from what I can figure out, if the body, your group doesn't support it, then for all intents and purposes, it's a waste of time to apply for an appeal, because if you're not going to support it, there's a pretty good chance that the body who's making the decision, whoever that might be, will probably not support it either. So when you're talking about situations where the topography of the particular property, and let's assume that we don't go with, gosh, I want a new deck, an extra 20 feet. We got a situation here where we got a very, very tough piece of property that needs to be dealt with. So my question is, am I stuck with this piece of property? Because obviously there's going to be no recommendation to do anything, and the body's going to probably go with the recommendation. So basically I'm kind of snookered.
I would say no. And I'm sure I will hear about this after I make this comment, you can almost engineer anything. So if there is a supporting study showing that there's no negative impact to whether it's a water body or other features in the area that need to be considered, if it's properly engineered and properly developed, there may be a reason that we could support that. Topography should not be the limit to development, because if you look across the Canadian Shield, not just in the county of Haliburton, it's a reality and there are ways to develop it, but responsibly.
Thank you. Councillor DeVolen.
No, there's been enough discussion in later draft versions. When we get it in the public, I'll comment then, but thank you.
Thank you. Charlesy?
Okay, thank you very much.
Excuse me.
I see a hand.
If we could, Mr. Chair, had a request for a brief break. So if we could, just because we're in between sections, if we could have maybe a 10-minute break.
It's fine with me.
So back at 10:35, is that okay? 10:23.
Thank you.
We're now live.
Thank you. We'll call the meeting back to order. Charlesy.
Great, thank you very much. The next item is shorelines, and restricting backlot development within the shoreline area. So that's the 300 meters of a shoreline. There's a number of different definitions of backlot out there, and I wanted to be very specific that this is what was asked. This was asked of me from County Council to see if there is a way to make a consistent policy across the county. Currently, one of our municipalities has a policy in place, so I did review that policy and elaborated on it a little bit further. So really what it is looking at a way to ensure that if a new lot is being created within that shoreline area, it has access to a municipally maintained road, and that we're not in future going to be seeing applications for either lot additions to allow access down to the water for that property, or that when the property is created, water access, whether that's communal or municipal access, is available to those lots. We do have some situations where people will split off or subdivide along the water frontage and leave a large back lot. So again, this would provide some standards on how that could be completed in order to develop the land. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to discuss.
Warden Dennison. You're muted.
My apologies. I was wondering about the minimum lot requirement of 10 hectares and what was behind that.
So that minimum lot requirement comes from making sure that there is, when the lots are created off the front of the property, adequate land at the back to facilitate further development. So again, that goes along with the requirement for municipal road frontage. We're talking, if that back lot is severed off, it's to be zoned rural. It is to be for permanent residential development. It was a recommendation, and if the local municipal bylaws require smaller lot sizes, then obviously we can have that discussion. Some require much larger for the rural area. So I was trying to pick a number in the middle that would be consistent.
Okay, Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. My question is around the new residential backlots shall not be permitted having access from only a seasonal public maintained road or private right-of-way. Is a cottage road a private right-of-way? Is that what we mean here?
Some cottage roads are private right-of-ways, and that is what we mean. Some cottage roads are seasonally maintained by our municipalities. So the municipality maintains it in the summer, and it is not plowed in the winter. We would also be including those. So it would need to be year-round maintained public road. And again, back to the conversation we had earlier about what are we planning for in the future? We have to think of who could be constructing that permanent dwelling. Are they going to need ambulance service, fire service, police service? Are they going to have children who need a school bus? We have many of these cottage roads, whether they're right-of-ways or only seasonally maintained, where school buses do not traverse. It's not safe to do so in the winter. So we have to have that consideration as well when we consider creating a new lot.
Carol?
I'm just thinking, certainly, I know a number of locations, certainly in Algonquin Highlands, where there's what used to be farmers' fields, and the waterfront sections of those areas have long been portioned off. There are now, on a lot of cottage roads, there are permanent residents, year-round residents now. And, you know, if somebody built a house, if there's an opportunity to build some houses in one of these fields or along that road, doesn't mean the school bus has to go there, because the school bus doesn't go to everybody's house anyway. So I'm just wondering if that part of it is just too limiting for certain circumstances.
So it's not, you're right. It's not that the school bus goes to every home. The school bus does not come to my house. We walk to an area where a number of children all get on the school bus. But it's that it's a safe means of access. As we look to develop more in our rural areas and make better use or higher, more intense use of our land. We just need to consider what the obligations are of the municipality in providing services. So if we are saying you can have a new development, permanent residential on a remotely removed private right of way off of a Crown land road in the backlands of Algonquin Highlands, I would suggest that is not good land use planning for today or for the future. So I think putting in a standard requirement for the creation of these lots, which will allow people to develop that waterfront portion so long as they meet the backlot requirements.
Cease.
Well, I guess I'm going to be at odds because I have a real problem with the 25, the size, because it's 25 acres, which we're talking about, which has to be the minimum lot size at the back, which to me sounds like it's just a bit much. In many places where I've been, it's more like 10 acres, which is probably, in my mind, a little more realistic. But having said that, that's the number we're there. And the other thing too is if we allow a permanent dwelling to be put on the lot, and we're saying that we're not going to allow people to build seasonal or build buildings for the purposes of using seasonally, all the challenges that would come with having seasonal people there wouldn't be any different than if we had when there were permanent people there, because permanent people live there. So they would want all of the things that you would think seasonal people do. I have dealt with a lot of people who have seasonal properties, are not on waterfront at all, period, do not want to be on waterfront and have no interest in waterfront, but they do want to get away and enjoy nature. So at the end of the day, I got kind of a problem with both sides. I don't have any problem with what we're trying to do. I understand that in absolute thoroughly, but I'm thinking we're being a lot restrictive here.
So if I could provide a little explanation, when we say that it can be developed for permanent residential, there's a standard that goes along with that. If you, as that property owner, only want to live in that dwelling seasonally, whether you want that to be your, hunting in the fall and, and a getaway in the spring, that's fine. But it would have to meet the standards of a permanent residential dwelling, is what we're saying. So we're not saying you can't have multiple homes in other areas. What we're saying is it has to meet that permanent dwelling minimum standard for servicing, for sight lines, for municipal services. That's what we're saying. But you could build a house to code for permanent residents and only be there 2 months a year if you want.
Councillor Kennedy.
And just a question, Charles, on moderate and high sensitivity water bodies. Are they described or defined in our official plan? They are?
Yes. So moderate is, I'm going to use the example of a lake trout lake that's not at capacity, right? So it could be Canice, could be Redstone. They're sensitive to new development, new uses, particularly when we're talking about seasonal versus permanent. Very highly sensitive water bodies would be a lake trout lake that is at capacity. So the ministry has done their studies, they've done the analysis, and it's determined to be at capacity. So no new development can occur anyways. So we're just making sure that if a back lot is developed, it can be outside of that 300-meter boundary. That's the ministry standard from a lake trout lake that's at capacity.
But that wouldn't impact any lakes that were not lake trout lakes.
Right. So they may be sensitive for other reasons. So Elephant Lake is an example where it is almost entirely a provincially significant wetland, not a lake trout lake, but definitely significant and sensitive to new development.
Okay. And then within the 300 meters, we're not allowing any access to water other than over open right of ways. Is that correct then?
Well, it's not that we're not allowing access to water, depending on the alignment of the lot. The remnant parcel, once the waterfront lots are taken off, could have access directly to water. That would be the best case scenario in a development. But when we're talking back lots, we're talking it's separated. It's physically not connected to the water. And we have many, many situations where people come forward for rights of ways across. Say I live next door to Councillor Roberts. I'm the back lot. I come to Councillor Roberts and say, I would like a right of way across your property to use the water. I get a 5 meter wide right of way. Then I sell my property and Councillor Roberts and the person I sell it to don't get along. And they park their trailer there. They have the right of way to do it. So there can be land use conflicts into the future. And we're trying to mitigate that. We're not saying it can't occur. We're trying to mitigate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions? Chelsea?
Oh, I see 2 more hands.
Well, you have better eyes than I do. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. And that, Charlesy, the example you just gave is exactly my concern and why I support this. Is access to water has become increasingly problematic over the last number of years, and conflict has ensued, unfortunately. And so I still have, and I'll maybe speak to you afterward, I'm not really sure that I'm clear on some of the stuff that I feel is extremely limiting for potential growth. You know, we don't live in a world of squares. And it could be the case that the 300 meters, while I appreciate that there's, you know, a limit there, that it could be just cutting off too many people from, you know, plunking a couple of permanent residences in a field somewhere that is not far from a highway or a municipally maintained road. So anyway, I think I need some clarification from you after the fact. So I'll circle back with you.
Great.
Councillor Ryle?
If I can clarify, this was a request of council. So if it's something that you feel would be better served at the local municipal level, then that is too an option. It's not required under the legislation to be included in the county plan. I was just asked to provide a policy that could be consistent across all the municipalities. So that is still an option as well.
Councillor Ryle.
This question isn't necessarily related to backlots. It's just related to severance in general. So probably not the right place to ask it, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. I have a piece of property. It's rectangular in shape. It's approximately 80 meters across, and it's God knows how deep. It has frontages on 2 roads across each end. So across 80 meters on one end, I'm on a municipally maintained road. And on the other end, I'm also on a municipally maintained road. I want to sever that property, but I don't want to sever it at right angles to either road. I want to sever it parallel to the roads. Can I do that?
So that's kind of a loaded question. My first question would be, are you on a county road or a municipal road or a private right of way? What's the current zoning?
Both. I'm on a municipal road and a county road.
Right. So
I'm on a municipal road and a county road.
There's too many variables for me to give an answer off the top. I would have to review the site specifically. It's not a yes or a no answer. You could have a wetland in the middle of the property. There's so many planning considerations. I see Councillor Kennedy laughing at me. It's unfortunately, it's not a simple yes or no answer. And Highlands East would be different than Algonquin Highlands.
Questions? Chelsea?
So the next item, still talking about shorelines, is existing development within the 30 meter setback and whether or not we can make people move their properties back. So I've provided as an attachment to this significant background into what legal non-complying and non-conforming rights are. And so in no way are we proposing through policy in the county plan taking away a person's legally existing right if they've already developed at 20 or 15 or 10 meters from the shoreline. I did add a little language that basically says a kind of the answer I just gave. Each property needs to be reviewed on an individual basis. I think that's important to have in there. So people who are reading and using the policy understand that it's not a cut and dry. Every property is unique, depending on when it was built, how it was built, under what piece of legislation it was built. So it's really, there's not a mechanism for us to force people back if they already exist closer than what we're setting as our standard now.
Councillor Roberts?
Thank you. So Charles, I know you were talking, started with the meeting with all the planners in the municipalities. So for instance, on an older lot that's 20 meters or even a lot that had no restriction back then where the property is sitting closer to the water, do all 4 local municipalities have similar zoning bylaws that if you want to increase the footprint, it can only be by X percent. If you want to, you can only increase by lot coverage, etc. Did you find the municipalities vary in their treatment of, when people want to rebuild and they're 18 meters to the high water mark?
Yes, there is variance across the municipalities because each zoning bylaw, I mean, there's differences. Head Lake is completely different than Boschgong. So there are differences across all of the municipalities. And two of the municipal zoning bylaws have been updated to be consistent with the current county official plan. So they do require for new development the strong suggestion that it be moved back. There's two zoning bylaws that need to be updated. And I mean, hopefully they'll be updated in accordance with our new bylaw or our new official plan. Yes, but there is difference.
Councillor Moffat?
Thank you. Just before we leave the shoreline section, there's nothing in this section that contradicts or presupposes anything that's as yet unresolved in the shoreline bylaw. They all work together. Can you just clarify that for me?
Absolutely. So they do work together. They're very complementary of each other. They're under two different pieces of legislation. So the policies in the official plan are under the Planning Act, which take effect at the time of new development or site alteration, where there's an application required under the Planning Act. So it doesn't apply all the time, only applies at the time of new development or site alteration. And the proposed shoreline preservation bylaw is under the Municipal Act, which would apply to all properties at all times, regardless of whether there's an application under the Planning Act. So the two mesh together and support each other moving forward in the protection of shorelines, lake, as well as water quality.
Warden Danielson?
Charlie, I'm just wondering if it's your experience that the MNR is keeping current with their assessment of the lakes?
Yes, actually, it's MNR in coordination with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And it's Environment, Conservation and Parks who do the testing, and they actually create a publication. I have a current copy in my office. It's a big binder about this thick for every single lake. The evaluation that was done, when it was done, who did it, all those details are there. If anybody wants to see it, I do have it.
That's good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Charlie?
So the next item was again asked to be elaborated on by County Council. And before I guess we go into it, what I would like to note is the province of Ontario has further extended the moratorium on new or increased water taking permits to April 1st, 2021. So they're not issuing or extending any new permits for this purpose. We also don't have any for a commercial purpose in the County of Haliburton at this point in time. That being said, I have gone through the Water Resources Act as well as the Ontario regulation that goes along with this. There's some proposed changes by the province and incorporated that into this proposed policy. We're just looking at a policy, in my opinion, of commercial water taking. So we're not talking about a residential development that may have a communal system permitted, again, by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. What we're talking here is just for commercial purposes in association with that bottling facility. I'm not going to run through the policy proposed, it's very long, but the only other item I would note is at the very bottom, the current policy says that the county and local governments will investigate the development of a strategy to regulate bulk water extraction and shipment. And I would recommend that if you wanted to move forward with the proposed, you could remove that. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to ask. All right.
Questions? No questions, Charles.
Great. Next item is a policy we do not have currently in the county official plan. One of our local municipalities does. It's taking that policy and creating a consistent standard across the county. And we're talking about the conversion of existing cottages and dwellings, seasonal, resource-based recreational, to permanent residential dwellings. There's a lot that would need to be considered when moving forward with a policy. There's a lot of impact to local residents, to our resource-based economy in doing this. But there's also impact to the taxpayer and the services municipalities may in future have to provide or may be requested or demanded from the local residents. So when we look at this, I've really tried to outline high level at minimum what I think a standard should be across the county if a person currently is in a shoreline area where it's zoned to only allow seasonal residential development and wanted to convert it to permanent residential development. We've had numerous requests from current property owners, potential property owners. And what I would say, because it may answer a question to be brought forward, is there is case law on this. So municipalities do have the right to zone a property as seasonal residential and are not required to transfer that to permanent residential living situations based on either the service level or based on another reasonable land use planning rationale. This was adjudicated at the Ontario Superior Court. The Township of Prince, I guess, took one for the municipal team in 2014. And it was adjudicated that they, through their zoning, can restrict people to only be on a property for seasonal, and they, in their bylaw, even say from May to October. And I just happen to know that, having been in Algoma prior to being here. So minimum requirements should be that it meets the building code for permanent residential dwelling, municipally maintained road, and there's a number of other items that I've identified in here. And I'm happy to discuss it. I know it's a very, it could be a controversial topic.
Okay, Councillor Kennedy.
Controversial should probably be in capital letters, Charlesy. Especially during this pandemic time, a lot of people are temporarily making their seasonal residents permanent residents. I really have major concerns over this. If there's with our standard of roads, what implications there are there of services, as you said. I'd like to see a little more detail before I would speak to either of these, but some of the things that came to mind was the potable water requirements, where you're saying you have to have a drilled well. I'm wondering if there isn't some room there that if we did move forward, that the water could be taken from the lake if it met the Clean Water Act or regulations contained here within as an option. The 3.5 gallons per minute with no reserve minimum on there was a bit of a surprise. Of a 100-foot well would have no reserve, whereas a well that was 400 feet that had 1 gallon per minute. Councillor Burt could probably tell us what the capacity of that was. I'm really worried about, now we go back to the lakes that are high sensitivity. As we open up a can of worms, say on Canisius Lake, that we're going to go around, we're going to knock on doors and say, you're living here permanently because we see your mailbox at the top of the hill. You can't live here. Is that where we're going? In theory, I know we're not going to do it, but that seems to me, I'm really worried about opening this can of worms, quite frankly.
And those are absolutely comments that I was expecting. Again, this is not a requirement of the county to have in their official plan. It was a proposal that I was asked to research a little further. What I can say, and I'm not trying to point fingers, is Dysart already has this policy in their plan. So this is actually modeled off of the municipal current requirements. Yes, due to the pandemic, we have a number of people who, they come up here and are making a home in the Haliburton Highlands. And, we want to encourage that. We want to be that supportive community. Like I said, this isn't something we have to do, but if we do it, it should be consistent between all of the local municipalities, and there should be a set process to do it. And I'm happy to have those further conversations if you all want to do that.
Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. On the one hand, I can see the reasoning behind it, but I share Councillor Kennedy's concerns. I don't understand how you would stop anybody from simply moving into their cottage and telling them that they can't be here. That just opens up the us and them can of worms again. That as we know from April and May this year was highly contentious and quite unnecessary and unfair. And so it doesn't apply to private cottage roads. And again, there's the enforcement and the criteria and the definition and who says. And I think it's problematic on a whole bunch of fronts. But I certainly am willing to hear what others have to say for sure.
Councillor Ryle.
On mute. I have a real problem with it as well, because right now we're using the word seasonal and we're using the word permanent with relation to the habitant, not to the habitat. When we talked about using the same word permanent on the back lots, we referred, or you implied that we were referring to the residence itself and how it was constructed rather than people who live there. I find that extremely confusing, because if we're going to use the word permanent to refer to the building and how it's constructed, there has to be a better term to be used than permanent, because now you're differentiating between permanent residence and seasonal residence, which to me is where all the confusion is. And I also do not agree that we should be restricting people. As people get older, I mean, I'm an example. We came here, we bought this place as a seasonal residence. We built it as a permanent home. Now we're here. So where are we? Like are we seasonal building, home? What? I'm, as you can tell, I'm a little frustrated with this.
And that's absolutely fine. There's always the nuance in planning as how things are determined, how things are defined. When we're talking seasonal versus permanent, the zoning is really what tells it. And back 20 years ago, we may all remember there was limited service residential. And that really was the zoning that denoted there was either no municipal road, no fire service, no police service. There was a number of different services that were not provided. And that zone really limited people to living there year round or not. Now, in today's standard, we have other things like the building code. A house or a dwelling or a cottage that was built in 1960, 1940, whenever, may not meet the current building code. And it's a public health and safety concern, really, when we allow or consider allowing people to transfer the use from seasonal or recreational. And I like to use the term resource-based recreational versus housing and dwelling, and those more permanent terms. Those come right out of the provincial policy statement. And there are differences in how they are constructed. Yes, if you have a house that meets today's building code and constructed to live in, you can use it seasonally as you wish. But there could be safety concerns if the dwelling is not built, does not meet fire code, does not have access in the winter. If we can't get a fire truck down the road and turn it around and get it back out, where does that leave you? Can we get an ambulance to you? There's so many concerns that from a public health and safety issue should be considered in this development. And again, as I said before, this isn't something that has to be in the county plan. It was requested for me to research and bring forward a policy. And then the only other item I would say is both Canada Post and the school board have specific requirements for how they will or will not provide services. And one of those is, what is your zoning? And they will call. I get calls from the post office all the time. I had one last week asking for a letter of confirmation. The school board, same thing. So these decisions don't just impact the municipality, they impact other agencies that also provide services.
Warden Danielson, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. I do see the need for this section. I think that it definitely needs some refinement. the way I look at it is that we're not necessarily going to be going around telling people they can't live in their seasonal house, but when they want to convert the building to permanent residence, that it would have to meet certain standards. And I think that there's a difference there. But, you know, obviously we need to land at a place that we can all live with. I do, however, though, see the need to have this section in the plan.
Okay, Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. In the section item D, it says approval obtained for class 4 sewage system, but outhouses are allowed. And so how come some people can have an outhouse, but if I want to convert my cottage, I can't? And I'm being a bit facetious or devil's advocate just to sort of get the juices flowing. And if I was told that I had to do all of these things, or I couldn't convert and live year round in my cottage, which has been suitable for me for many years, I think I'd be looking for a taxation cutback, because if you're going to tell me that I can't be there year round unless I invest all this money, I can just see there being, as Councillor Kennedy has already said, I can see this section being very contentious and needing a lot more clarification, I think. Thank you.
Councillor DeVolen.
Two things. First of all, Charlesy, in the absence of having this, do we not expose ourselves to some litigious elements or challenges with respect to any type of emergency services?
So again, each local municipality identifies their different zones in different ways and what is and is not provided. Not necessarily, depending if we're talking fire or police or ambulance. However, when we do create new development, you'll notice one of the conditions that we always put on there, if it's a new plan of subdivision or condo with a private road, we put a condition on there that if there's a gate and we cannot get in through that gate, so if our EMS doesn't have a key, if our fire doesn't have a key, we're not responsible. So you try to mitigate it as best you can when new development or site alteration comes forward. It doesn't necessarily go backwards though. So there is a caution there. Again, we don't have to have the policy, and local municipalities could choose to regulate it themselves or not.
Secondarily, basically seasonal properties on a whole bunch of levels, the buildings, water, septic, whatever, at a lower standard, to me seems to be in complete conflict to our shoreline preservation and water quality, and that's another element that I'm challenged with. I'm not saying how, but I'm just saying that those things seem in conflict to me.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm writing.
Okay. Warden Danielson.
My concern when it comes to liability is what our level of risk is when it comes to the water quality that's used for drinking.
And it's water quality and quantity. As we all know, we're on the Trent Severn Waterway. Our lake levels fluctuate significantly. We have a lot of older water lines, whether they cross municipal infrastructure or whether they go from the lot directly into the water body, that we get calls from people upset that their water line is dry. Maybe it's not long enough. Maybe the water level has fluctuated. And we, as the municipalities, cannot guarantee that every person has a top of the line UV water filtration system and secondary system within whatever that dwelling is, which is where that whole building permit comes in to ensure public health and safety when we're upgrading dwellings. It's a larger issue. It's not a simple yes or no answer. Yes, you can do this, or no, you can't do that. Each lot is to be considered on its own merits.
Councillor Ryle.
First off, Charlie, thank you for doing this. I mean, we're taking this thing apart, and we're not taking you apart. So please do not take anything I'm saying, especially me. Don't take anything I'm saying personal, because it's got nothing to do. You're doing an awesome job trying to just take all this information and get it back to us. But it sounds to me like we got a situation here between the actual occupancy of the property and the people that are in there and the building itself. Is there any way we could set this up so that there was a separation between the two within the law that says, if you're going to have a building and you're going to occupy it 12 months of the year or potentially 12 months of the year, then it has to meet these minimum requirements structurally. And then from that, if there is going to be a section related to residency, could we not have specifications there so that we don't get them muddled? And at the end of the day, there's clear cut. So whether it's a back lot, whether it's a front lot, or whether it's anywhere, this is the building requirements to build a home in Haliburton County, case closed. And here are the rules for occupancy in certain areas. I'm just saying it might solve some problems.
So to answer your question, the answer is yes. However, if you want to build, if I buy a property, 100 acres, 10 acres, and I want to just build a hunt camp, the requirements for me to do that would be completely different than building a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom dwelling. And that's just in the building code, right? That's outside of the jurisdiction of the municipality. So yeah, you can do that, but then you can also end up creating more problems than you're solving by doing that. It's always, in my opinion, best to leave that sort of ideal to the zoning bylaw so that you're not stepping on the idea of people zoning, which we discussed earlier. Again, it's a very complicated issue, and it will create some conversations. I'm happy to bring it back. I'm happy to take some of these comments, massage the language a little bit. And in the end, you're right. I mean, it's something that you need to decide, is this worth taking forward in a policy for the next 10 years? Because that's, until our plan is reviewed at that point in time. And to answer your question or your comment earlier, we, as planners, we constantly understand and answer questions, and in no way, Councillor Ryle, am I taking any of it personally.
Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, just further on Councillor Moffat's comment, if we did change somebody's seasonal to permanent, is there an impact assessment difference there?
Yes.
So maybe be careful what you ask for question too, is what I'm getting at, that may offset the micro home impacts there, lower taxation.
Other questions? Carol?
I was just trying to scrape back in my mind somewhere, I believe, in terms of the question around, long, narrow roads and access for emergency services. And I'm not sure if it's in the ENR bylaw, the enacting and regulating bylaw for fire services, or if it's somewhere in our planning documentation. Charles, you may know that. That there is language contained in somewhere in Algonquin Highlands that kind of covers that the township will do the best to get services, but if you're too far flung, sometimes you could be out of luck. It uses much nicer language than that, but it does provide a little bit of protection for if you choose to live down the Rocky behind the knoll in the lee of the tree, you may not get a fire truck in a timely fashion. They might have to come by ambulance or ATV or boat, or there may be some limitations there. So somewhere in something that we already have contains that language.
Correct. And at the local municipalities, because you're the providers for fire, it would be within your documentation. And at the county, because we're the providers of EMS, it would be in ours. And, to all of our first responders, we know that they go above and beyond trying to get to some of these situations, putting their own lives at risk while doing so. And when we look at planning decisions, we need to make those considerations as well. Is it worth it in the long term? So I will take this back and I will make a few changes. And in the end, if it doesn't move forward, it doesn't move forward. But at least we've had the conversation.
Okay.
So the next item is new lot creation and requiring on-site services. So again, this is when something new is being created and ensuring that the longevity of the property can be maintained, water quantity, water quality, as well as trying to reduce the impact on municipal infrastructure. I know, I'm going to use an example from one of our local municipalities where we have a number of resource-based recreational properties along a municipal road. They use or utilize municipal infrastructure, whether that's your culverts, to put power lines, water lines through there to the water body to take water. And now a municipality wants to redo the road. What do? And if we hadn't created that situation in the first place, if we had ensured that each property could be self-sufficient, then that municipality, and it's more than one, would maybe not have such a difficult time trying to wade through that situation, because it's a situation that impacts financially on the municipality. It's a suggestion. A number of our neighboring counties utilize this policy. It was most recently approved by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in the County of Hastings plan, so right next door to us, and it is now their standard. So this is the basic requirements from a policy standpoint. If there's any questions?
Questions? None.
Oh.
Sorry, Councillor.
Last one is the 3.5 gallons per minute. That is that a concern with some wells?
No.
Okay, I just wondered that about if there was a capacity reserve that might offset some of that.
No. Chelsea?
Next item, pre-consultation requirements, and this is our very last item. So again, we had discussions previously that there are different processes in each of the local municipalities. The county does require, where we are the approval authority, so for plans of subdivision, plans of condo, consent, some site plan, as well as official plan amendments, that an applicant do pre-consultation with the local municipality as part of a complete application to us. So we want to know that they've had a conversation with that local planning lens on their proposal, and that is brought forward for our consideration in the decision-making process. This is at the very beginning of a process. This is before an application is submitted formally under the Planning Act. And I wanted to outline what it is we're actually looking for. So I want everyone to understand, once an application is made, at that point, we do circulate to that municipality for their council comments and review. It's not necessary as part of the pre-consultation process that it goes to council. So in some situations at the local level, it's going to council twice or more. And really what pre-consultation is more of an identification that, yes, it meets the current local municipal plan, local zoning. We identify you have a locally significant wetland that needs to be addressed or avoided, that sort of thing. Those are the kinds of information we're looking for, and that the landowner would want to look for as well, so they know if they have to do any studies to support what they're proposing. And in many instances where there is a larger development, myself or my staff and the local municipal staff will work in tandem and meet together with an applicant. So it's one stop, not having to go to, say, Dysart first and then come to the county. We do it together as one. So this is really a policy providing what I think is a little more clarity on the process. Again, how local municipalities decide to do pre-consultation is entirely up to you. This is what we're looking for as part of that process.
Councillor Moffat.
Being right in the thick of one of these situations at the moment. I just wonder, I would look to my colleagues, there are a lot of municipalities that delegate the authority for pre-consultation to the planner in order to undertake exactly what's been laid out for us here. I'd like to know if anybody in Haliburton County is currently delegating this pre-consultation authority to the planner, or if there's any interest in doing that. Just take a layer of.
I know the answer is yes. Maybe you can't tell I'm looking at you.
do share more. So okay, this is a public meeting. Who else delegates the authority to their planner so that council isn't in the mix at the very beginning?
So I don't know if there's a formal delegation bylaw, but I know the Township of Minden Hills, their planner creates a planning report and summary that is then provided to the applicant with their complete application for whatever that application is. And I believe that the municipality of Dysart is moving in that direction as well. So that would be 2 out of 4.
Warden Dowson?
Well, I'm just kind of wondering about, okay, so you've got an official plan and your zoning bylaws in place, and those are the documents that the planner would look at when they're doing the pre-consultation. But what if you're in the process, or you've over a period of time, you developed a philosophy that you're looking forward to developing it or formalizing at some point in time, but it's not necessarily embedded in one of your documents. And I think the issue of philosophy is where you might want to go to council. And I think that's maybe in some ways where we've landed in Algonquin Highlands a couple of times. I don't know, I guess it's a good question to just say who's delegating it completely, and is that going to cover all of our bases, or at some point it comes back to council, so we've got an opportunity to speak to the application anyway.
And so maybe I can answer that. It will, if it's an approval that is required by county council, it will always go to the local municipality. I require, as part of my internal process, to have a resolution of support from the council on whatever that application is, or resolution not providing support. I mean, the local municipality can provide either. What I would say is this is really before there's even an application. It's so people can get an idea of what it is they need to do. How long is it going to take? I need an EIS. How long is that going to take me? Who do I hire to do that? That's really what the pre-consultation is for. And I would respectfully caution that if council is doing the pre-consultation, it could be interpreted by the public or by the applicant of pre-deciding. And in a situation where you may not be the final decision making authority, that could be contentious. As well, to your other comment, Warden Danielson, if it's an idea and it's a philosophy, but it's not in an approved document, policy document, if I, as the planner, went to the LPAT, let's just say worst case scenario, I need to make sure I can defend whatever rationale and decision I have recommended to that approval authority. And if I don't have it in an approved official document, I have no leg to stand on.
Andrea?
So yes, we definitely do pre-consultation. Some of these studies are so expensive now that if that applicant doesn't know what they're up against before they even get started, and then it's already come into the public realm and it's in front of council, and then they find out they have to do archaeology studies or, so there's just so much involved in planning. So Dysart is all about pre-consultation and before it comes to council for sure.
All right.
Okay.
Chelsea?
That is all from me, and I thank you very much for your time and your many thoughtful comments. So I will bring something forward, draft, and hopefully I will organize it so we can have an actual public meeting with members of the public and hear what they have to say as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Could we have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Boland, second by Warden Danielson. Mike.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Warden Danielson. Be it resolved that the report on the County of Haliburton official plan amendment be received by the Haliburton County Committee of the Whole, and that staff be directed to incorporate the committee's comments into draft policies to be presented to County Council.
All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you.
So the next item is personnel, and I think we're really leaning on Councillor Burton today because Councillor Burton is responsible for personnel. So over to you again.
Okay, thank you very much, Warden. Expression of compassion policy. Andrea, I believe you're going to do that if you're there.
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry, I just got disconnected for a minute.
We can hear you, but we can't see you
Can't
yet.
see me. My camera's on. Oh. Oh, goodness.
IT is on the way.
Technical difficulties. 1 second. Okay, there I am.
There she is.
Good morning. I'm bringing to you today a new policy recommendation with regards to memorial donations. Currently, the county has a flag lowering policy, but we don't have anything that formally speaks to memorial donations. And that is something that the county does do on behalf of council and staff when there is a death. So I've taken the current flag lowering policy and expanded on that to create the draft expressions of compassion policy as presented to you. Not sure if anyone has any questions.
Councillor Moffat?
I feel like I'm just being the devil's advocate today. On the one hand, I appreciate the clarity that this draft brings to this situation. And another part of me says, in a world where we're looking for money every time, every chance we get, is it appropriate to spend taxpayers' money on flowers or donations? Part of me thinks it's a really good idea and we've done it for years, sort of informally. But the other part of me says, I don't know. So I just put that out there. I feel like I sound like a big meanie, but just asking.
Councillor DeVolen?
And I'm at the other end of the spectrum for municipal councillors, past and present, and staff. A bit of money where I think they've got exceptional value is there are other places we could save money.
Okay. Andrea? Warden Danielson.
Somewhere in between Councillors DeVolen and Moffat, I sort of looked at this in the same terms as donations, and in Algonquin Highlands we don't make donations to organizations because it's like you're choosing on behalf of the taxpayer who may not agree with the decisions that you're making about who you donate your money to. But this is a little bit different, where you're talking about your own people, your own staff, people who've worked with you for a period of time. I'm not sure about the entire list that's been included here, but I certainly can see the benefit of council and staff and our own MP and MPP.
Andrea?
I don't have much more to add right now. The flag at half-mast policy hasn't been touched at all. So it is just adding the memorial donations if councillors are interested in doing that.
All right. Some are, some aren't. Councillor Schell.
$50 and I'm fully in favor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ryle?
I think in light of the fact that we're talking about people who have, we don't know how long they have been because we're not dealing about somebody in particular, but they're people who have contributed to this county and or perhaps a municipality, depending on what they were doing. I don't see it as an expense. I see it as just a thank you to the hard work that's been done by those people, and it's our recognition of what has been done. And I can't really honestly see the constituents that we represent having any problem with that.
Right. Anyone else? Councillor Moffat?
I'm fine with it. I just think it's our job to ask the questions to make sure we've all considered it. That's all.
All right. Any further questions, comments? If not, could I have someone move the resolution? Councillor Roberts, second by Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that the Haliburton County Committee of the Whole receives for information the October 14th, 2020 staff report presenting a draft expressions of compassion policy for consideration. And further, that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council that the expressions of compassion policy be adopted.
All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you.
Yeah.
Safe restart funding, Andrea.
I think I'll take this report if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
The council will recall that in early August, we received an allocation of $1,435,300 for COVID-19 operating costs and pressures. The treasurer reported earlier today, at the end of September, we had spent $295,659. Much of that has been covered by other sources. An example of that is the top-up pay for paramedics. This is strictly for operating costs and pressures. I believe the warden had mentioned that the EOWC passed a resolution recently trying to get the province to provide a little more flexibility with respect to how this money could be used. And they cited certain issues where council chambers may have to be modified in order to accommodate in-person meetings and allow for physical distancing. But at this point, to my knowledge, that decision hasn't been made, or we haven't heard back on that. So department heads met and talked about how COVID is affecting their operations and how they may require some additional resources in order to respond to those new pressures. And so we have developed a proposal for council's consideration. You did see the IT report at the last meeting, where we had some specific council direction to look at some additional IT support, and you approved that. We're now looking, the Torrey Hill ambulance, as you may recall, is currently 24/7 in the summer months, and that is expanding. We are working on adding to each end of that summer complement each year. But we do anticipate that this year we will have a much larger population in the winter. Many of our snowbirds aren't leaving. And we also know that a number of individuals are making a choice to live here as opposed to going back to the larger centers. And so we're proposing that we would upstaff that ambulance to 24 hours a day from November from now really until at least next fall. So when it would normally stop, we will revisit that conversation. The cost of that is about $333,000, just about. The planning director, as you all know, has been working on more project related work, and very capably, I might add. And COVID has delayed a number of those projects. I believe she's mentioned on a few occasions that the LiDAR project has been delayed as a result of not the county changes in our operation, but the operation of another involved agency. And so what we're finding now is that there's a significant backlog that has been created. And if she is to finalize those projects or bring them to a conclusion, we really need some assistance helping to process what I would call the day-to-day applications. And our recommendation is that that be a planning position where they could do planning reports, defend them at the LPAT if necessary. And so that would be $215,000 for a 2-year contract position. The other, I guess, issue that we have is around roads and road staffing. In the summer, we were able, because of public health protocols or other changes, staff sick, we were able to either reduce the size of a crew, put a job off a day or two, or even put it off for a season. And it's not really very problematic or doesn't create challenges we can't overcome. Winter maintenance isn't like that. And so we can't put off maintaining the roads. We have minimum maintenance standards that we have to adhere to. And so, and I know that the local municipalities have similar challenges. The directors of public works have been working on developing a plan, I guess, to support one another if it's necessary, and hopefully it won't be, but if it is necessary, they've been working on that. Part of our preparedness for that and our own issues is to recommend the addition of 2 winter seasonal positions, and that would cost about $55,000. The total of the investments, including the IT position that has already been approved, is $775,000. So we are proposing not to spend the entire allocation because we know we're not through this yet. We know that there will be more challenges and more expenses to be incurred down the road. But we are proposing this to keep us on track for the time being and to provide an appropriate response and service level in all of those departments.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Questions? Warden Danielson.
I in no way want to suggest that we don't need to do all of these things. When I read the report, my initial concern was justifying the planning position under COVID. I hear what Mike's saying about the fact that COVID has created delays. I just looked at the list of projects and tried to link them specifically to COVID and had a little bit of difficulty with that. But you know, in your intro, you talked about the fact that we have more people staying here on a longer term basis, more people making conversions of their homes and looking at different aspects of planning applications, which would definitely be an impact of COVID. So I've just wanted to voice a little bit of concern about how we would justify the planning portion of it.
Mike?
And I in no way meant to say that we don't need it, because I believe we do.
No, absolutely. I think it really has been, we are finding the backlog that has been created. So the LIDAR project is a perfect example. Nothing could happen on that because the conservation authorities that are doing some of that work for us, really, they closed their offices and were very limited in what they could do. That's an example. I think the shoreline preservation bylaw, as an example, we couldn't do the public consultation that was intended to be done through the summer of 2020. But the goal has always been to have something in place, whatever that might look like by the spring of 2021. And so that has condensed the amount of time we have to do the same amount of work and public consultation. And in fact, it may take more effort because of the limitations around, you know, we don't just rent a hall anymore and set up some seats. We have to do a lot more to support that activity. The Affordable Housing Targets Program is another one. We were supposed to have a first intake in the spring and summer of 2021. That hasn't happened. So now they are doing 2 years at one time. Each of those has a planning involvement. Those are just some examples. We really have seen the work condense, and it's certainly not that you know, the planning director is saying I'm not prepared to do the extra work to get it done. It's just the most effective way to get all of that done is to free her up from the day-to-day and move her to the project related work.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. I have a question about the EMS proposal, and I'd like to know if upstaffing Tory Hill in this manner will also allow for a truck to stay at Algonquin Highlands to service the Highway 35 corridor, which will also be seeing an increase in people staying around.
I might not be the most appropriate person to answer this question. So if we could bring the director in, I can start though by saying that we have a fluid deployment model. So as an example, the vehicles are stationed where it's most likely that they will get a call. That tends to be at our larger urban centers. When they are called out from there, so during the night is really when this additional resource would be in place. Then if they get a call in Haliburton, as an example, the Haliburton car would go do the call, and Tory Hill would come to Haliburton. So it would be closer to Algonquin Highlands, and so it's closer to, you know, where they may get a call. But it is just an additional resource, and available through the night. And yes, it would support anywhere in the county based on that fluid deployment model. But I would let the chief kind of supplement that answer.
Welcome, Tim.
There we go. Perfect. Yeah, to answer your question, it would increase coverage over in the Algonquin Highlands, just as we do during the day right now when we have 4 trucks on. If all 4 trucks are in the county, then 1 is stationed over in Stanhope area. However, when the Tory Hill car leaves and they go home at 7 o'clock, then that car is redeployed over to Tory Hill. So we lose the standby coverage over in Stanhope around 6 o'clock or quarter after 6. So this would maintain the coverage over in Stanhope with the standby. Again, if all cars are in the county, till probably around 10 p.m. at night until the 11 o'clock truck went off duty.
Okay. Councillor Kennedy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Actually, Mike answered the first part of it. I had questioned how long this 332,000 was going to last. It said the pandemic, but I see now that you're talking about from now till roughly a year from now. I wonder is there any merit in extending that for the full 2021 calendar year, and if that would help segue us into getting Tory Hill up to 24-hour status quicker, if we could use that in 2022 as part of our 50-50 funding then. Because we are funded a year behind. So if we funded this envelope for the whole calendar year, would that then translate into our budget in 2022 being able to take advantage of those funds?
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Could we report back? We have some time, but could we report back? But I think that's an excellent suggestion. But I just have to work through the detail of that in my own mind, and I can work with the chief and the treasurer on that.
And supplement to that, if I may, we haven't seen a call volume report for quite a while. And I'm wondering if that may be extra ammunition as well moving forward, and also possibly, Tim, a forecast of what you think may happen with our seniors staying home this winter.
Yeah, call volume reports, yeah, not a problem. Yeah, forecasting, boy, that's a challenge. Just thanks for that one, Councillor Kennedy. I'm really, you got my mind how to figure that one out. It's such a dynamic field that, as we discussed previously, are we going to see more ATV accidents, more snowmobile accidents because people aren't going away? Or are there going to be more seniors here during the winter months because they're not going to Florida? So will we see your increase in your chest pains, your shortness of breath, maybe increased strokes? It's certainly all a possibility to forecast it. Boy, we'll see what we can do with that one.
You can't beat that.
I've even heard of some seniors that are getting back into the snowmobiling business and just.
I hope you're not going to see the backside of an ambulance.
Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. My question is about winter control, and I'm aware certainly of the staff discussions that have been happening. It is of concern, as has been noted, about maintenance standards, minimum maintenance standards. The proposal for the hiring for those folks, are they floating for the whole county or just for the county?
I probably realize this is the wrong answer. I think we would probably look at our needs first, and then if they are available, we would be happy to support those. We do have the local municipalities. We do have some flexibility that would, I guess, allow them to be used more often, because we can shorten routes and we can reduce the number of routes because we are a 2-shift system. So we have the ability to do some changes like that would allow us to free those people up. We just really don't have any idea how much they will be needed, and so we would have to make sure that the county roads are done, but if at all possible, we would make those available to the local municipalities. And the public works directors have done, they're making sure that the routes are mapped really well. They're making sure that Any staff that is, in that seat on a temporary basis would know where the really high risk areas are, where there's, it takes some real finesse to plow a road and to sand a road. And so they're doing a great job preparing for that. And so this just is another tool for them to use.
Okay. Any other questions? Mike?
I don't think I have anything else to add on that report, sir.
All right. Could I have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Boland and Councillor Kennedy, second. All in favor? I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that the October 14th, 2020 Safe Restart Funding Staff Report be received by Haliburton County Committee of the Whole, and that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council that staff be directed to implement the staffing additions outlined in the report to be funded from the Safe Restart funding.
All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. So our next section is tourism, and I will turn that over to Councillor Moffat. I know that we are in a bit of a state of change with tourism, but I think that if you could take this over.
Thank you very much, Madam Warden. I think we're bringing in the Director of Tourism.
Good morning, councillors.
Oh, there she is. Good morning. First up for you, Amanda, is the winter edition of Hike Haliburton.
Yes, so I thought I would just do a quick recap of the 2020 festival that took place February 8th and 9th. As you know, this was a snowshoe festival. It was our first ever. We had 20 guided snowshoe hikes. We had over 300 people participate in the 20 hikes, averaging 15 people per hike. The hikes were spread across the entire county, and they varied in length from 1 kilometer to 10 kilometers. For the record, I did not do the 10-kilometer snowshoe hike, or I would not be sitting here right now. We did 5 hikes on private land. Volunteerism was very strong. We had 22 hike leaders and we had 20 hike sweeps. And we did something a little different. The festival was entirely virtual, meaning we didn't have any printed brochures or maps or associated costs with printing. And so the full program and registration occurred entirely online. Just a few highlights. 97% of participants rated the festival as excellent or very good. 100% of the participants indicated they would participate again. 83% of participants were seasonal or permanent residents, and 17%, so 51, were visitors. 58% noted that they spent money on restaurants during the festival. 26% noted they spent money at retailers, and 16% noted that they spent money on both retailers and restaurants during the festival. So in looking ahead at the possibility of a winter edition for 2021, program development would need to start in early November, so just 2 weeks from now, basically, and registration would launch prior to the new year. So at this time, I'm just asking that we consider the following options and discuss what that could look like. So for option 1, considering the full-scale festival, just as we did in 2020, being mindful of all COVID safety protocols, of course. Option B would be to limit the number of hike participants, possibly the number of hikes, and again, be mindful of all COVID safety protocols. And option C would be to not hold the festival in February 2021, just due to the unknowns related to COVID and the evolving situation. Something else to keep in mind is that, of course, travel is not encouraged at the moment throughout the process. So if we were to hold the festival, it could be an extremely hyper-local activity, which could be a good thing.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'll apologize in advance for the person outside the window cutting stone with a saw, in case you hear that. Looking for thoughts from council. I would just add that we know that all reports indicate that increased outdoor activity will continue. We're certainly seeing that in the Algonquin Highlands. Water trails is still quite busy right now, despite the weather. And our Parks Rec and Trails manager is certainly anticipating a robust uptake of snowshoeing and skiing, because you can distance and you can, get outdoors and be active in the absence of gyms and other organized programs. So yeah, looking for thoughts from council on what you'd like to see happen here. Councillor Roberts.
So in light of what you just said, and I know that we made the decision to cancel the Hike Haliburton Festival, and I just want to say what a great job you did, though, at promoting hiking in Haliburton, regardless of not having a festival. And a lot of people are hiking on the open trail, certainly not on the private land. So in light of that, I'd actually think that maybe we could go forward as long as we meet the COVID protocols. People have to pre-register, so we have contact tracing. We know the names and the contact of who is going to be on that hike. I think it's something we should try to go forward with, and if possible, maybe find some other places to snowshoe. Actually, how many hikes were there, or snowshoe trails?
We had 20.
20. So you never more. So I'd like to go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I saw Councillor Kennedy's hand first, I think, and then Councillor Ryall, and then Councillor Schell.
Yeah, I am full support of option A with the COVID restrictions. I think there's going to be a huge demand for it. And if we try and cut down the number of hikes, I think we're just limiting ourselves. And I'd like to see it go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Ryall.
I totally agree. I mean, the numbers that I'm getting now are saying that for every 3 cottages that closed last year, there's one definitely is not going to be closing this year. And that number could be going up. So you're getting an additional 1/3 people, and they're all active people. I know the lady that lives next door to us is a little older, but she loves to walk, and this would be a great opportunity. So if there's any way, shape, or form we can pull this off, I think we should.
Great, thank you. Councillor Schell?
Just in agreement with option A, I say to move ahead.
And Warden Danielson, did I see your hand? And then Councillor Burton.
Yeah, I definitely think that we should go ahead. With what I was thinking, though, was that maybe we might limit the number of participants in each hike, but maybe have, the opportunity for more hikes. But that's sort of getting into semantics. But if we're going to have greater uptake, I think we maybe need to consider limiting the number of participants in each hike. But otherwise, yes, I think we should go full steam ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Burton.
And I totally agree with option A and going ahead.
Well, it sounds like a sweep to me. Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add to that. It's not only the benefit of those 2 days that we're calling the event. What we end up getting for a very reasonable amount of cost is advertising before, during, and after, and people, especially the ones that are on public land, like the trails in Glebe Park as an example, it gets that promotion for the whole winter. So it isn't just that we're advertising those 2 days, it's ongoing. So I think it's really important.
Well, and I think something else to consider is, even if there aren't a lot of people who are going to come here, we already know that there are more people staying here. And if it's one more opportunity it's virtual anyway, it's not a financially onerous event. If we even just get more of our people out and about and seeing other humans and having some exercise, that's just a win for our community on its own as well. So I see it that way. Amanda, I think you have what you need there?
I do indeed. I just wanted to quickly reference, though, Warden Danielson's comment just about the number of people per hike. So we did have an average of 15 per hike, which by provincial regulations would still be fine. So we'll just continue to monitor that, how many people can be together outside. And if we have to limit the numbers or change them, we can do that on the fly.
Yeah, so we'll leave all those details with you, including there might be some challenges with restaurants, but maybe there's some partnerships to be created with some takeout or picnics or something. Just we'll leave those options with you, I guess. If there's nothing further, if I could have a mover and a seconder for this to select option A for this report. I see Warden Danielson and Councillor Shell.
By Warden Danielson, seconded by Councillor Shell, be it resolved that the County of Haliburton Committee of the Whole receives for information the report on the 2020 Hike Haliburton Winter Edition and direct staff to proceed with option A for 2021.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The second report for you is your tourism department report. So you've got a couple of updates for us there. Take it away.
Yes, so I do apologize. It's a wee bit of a lengthy report. I'll try to go through it quickly. When I say lengthy, that's by tourism standards, not by planning standards, so don't panic. But right now, I just thought it would be a good time just to recap because we haven't had a report since May. So just to be able to look at what we've done sort of from June to September around, the pandemic and how we've been marketing. So as per the approved repositioned marketing plan in May, what we've done is we shifted our target audience to those sort of within a 3 to 5 hour driving radius max. When it's safe to do so, we have had to pivot occasionally depending on government regulations. Of course, we moved away from national and international travel. We focused on the natural space of the Haliburton Highlands in our marketing, highlighting our accommodations. We enhanced our Dinner on the Dock program, focusing on takeout and expanding participation from local food establishments. We pushed all of our longer lead and print media campaigns out toward the end of the year or even early next as approved, just as we watch what those regulations continue to be. We supported local initiatives and organizations. So we worked really closely with Minden Pride, as you know, with the rebrand to Minden Pride in the Haliburton Highlands. We worked very closely with Studio Tour, with the Arts Council, the Chamber of Commerce. We conducted those remaining tourism workshops that we held for stakeholders. We did all of those virtually throughout the summer. It actually worked quite well when there were some folks who were still in closure mode because they did have a bit of extra time to learn and work with us there. We continued work on our destination management plan. There'll be a little bit more to follow on that shortly. And we reevaluated the Hike Haliburton Festival, which was unfortunately canceled for 2020 September. In relation to all of the above, some of the tactics that were completed and are still underway, you can see some attached screenshots in your package. We did, in partnership with Ontario's Highlands and with a media partner, National Post Online, we did the Love Letter to Haliburton, which was a large social media, user-generated content promotion. It did get us some great coverage in the National Post Online. And there's some screenshots there as well of some of the Facebook messaging through Ontario's Highlands and some of the Instagram posts that were shared with that hashtag. You'll also see that we participated in a large program, which is supported by Destination Ontario and Destination Canada with the Culinary Tourism Alliance called the Great Taste of Ontario Road Trip. Our food tourism coordinator has been very invested in developing some passports and travel programming around that. The media partner there is the Globe and Mail. However, that has been delayed into mid-November due to the restrictions with some of our regions going back into phase 2 in Ontario, but we continue to work on how we can promote our restaurants throughout there. We launched some new website sections that were seasonal. So we launched the From a Distance page, which was really a major pivot for us, focusing on the things that you could do when we were under really the full closure. There was a lot of online participation available there for our visitors and residents. As I mentioned, repositioning the Dinner on the Dock program, and we launched quite a successful fall color page, which really we did with the mind to steer folks away from the Dorset Tower, of course, because it was closed, and really explore the rest of our community and see those fall colors. So we had daily fall color reports, lots of video. We created a lot of content around fishing, paddling, hiking, all of those socially distanced and friendly activities that you can do here. We had more frequent and timely videos, and we launched some new e-newsletters. We had a food and drink newsletter, a takeout newsletter, From a Distance newsletter, and a local experience newsletter. We had huge uptake in those newsletters, and I'll touch on that in a moment. Just so you know, now we're currently shifting quickly to winter messaging for our short lead and digital promotions. Eric Casper has been working with the snowmobile associations in our region, and we'll soon be launching the Trailblazers Tour Loop in participation with the Potash Trailblazers. You'll remember that we did the Far Loop last year with the Haliburton County Snowmobile Association, so we reached out for another partnership here. We're also working on heavily promoting ice fishing and incorporating many experiences and more content and video throughout all of our social channels. I don't know, are there any questions there so far?
Anybody want to ask anything so far on those? Nope, keep going.
Thank you so much. Bear with me. Another really key thing that we've done basically from May till now, and these sooner even, is working with our business operators and our stakeholders on a number of engagement pieces. So over the course of the pandemic, we've assisted our business operators and tourism stakeholders with the interpretation and understanding of the changing regulations in working with our health unit and various levels of government. We know that the stakeholders were grateful to us for this, and it actually opened up some new relations with us for stakeholders, so it was great. We created customized PDFs that our stakeholders could share with their visitors, outlining safe activities, what they can do in our community. In partnership with the health unit, we provided contact tracing forms for our restaurant to leverage with their patrons. So if you've been to a local restaurant, you'll see the little notepads that you can put your contact tracing on there. We organized that. We hosted a variety of workshops to assist businesses in how to pivot their messaging during this time. To better assist our accommodators, we did an audit, which will allow us to align their Google My Business pages more closely with their current offerings. And as a result of our recent summer survey, which I'll touch on shortly, we're working with several operators throughout the last quarter of this year to do everything from brand audits to social media training to partnerships and funding opportunities. So we're really highly engaged with our stakeholders and continuing to leverage those relationships throughout the course of this year and beyond. Some key metrics, this is as of the end of September. We've had over 10 million media impressions. We're 32% ahead of this time last year. We've had increase of social media reach across the board, up across approximately 15% of the same time last year. Our Instagram followers have grown by 1,800 people from the end of 2019. We've had 40,400 unique website visitors. That's 21% ahead of the same time last year. And on the newsletters, we've had a 42% open rate on newsletters. 18% is considered the industry average. So kudos to Eric Casper, who's really been leading those initiatives. And that's 6% over 2019. And we've had a 38% click-through rate on newsletters. So we know that people are actually clicking through, reaching out to the businesses and getting more information. Now to the survey. I was very hesitant to do a survey. As you know, there were several surveys in market with several different organizations, and I think our stakeholders were feeling a bit of fatigue there. So we were really careful around when we did want to put out one survey to speak with our stakeholders. So we did one basically at the end of September that kind of covered the summer and looking at how successful they were. So we received a 20% response rate. Of those, 38% were accommodators, 22% were experience providers, 20% were food establishments, 12 retail, and 18 other. Those other, just so you know, some folks do many of those things, so they weren't defined as one particular organization over another. Some interesting results to note. 38% of respondents noted that visitation to their business was up this summer over 2019. 32% said down. 34% of respondents noted that revenue was up this summer over 2019. 40% said down. So I think we can look at that as almost a half and half, really. 41% of respondents cited insufficient staff, limited their capacity to do business this summer. I think we know that was a challenge across the board. And 30% of respondents said September 2020 was on track for being up over September 2019. The other attachment, which I won't reference right now, you can look at it at your leisure, it's in your package, but was just from Destination Ontario, and it was as of basically September 16th, that just talked about the impact of COVID-19 on the Canadian economy and consumer sentiment. So there's some interesting statistics in there just for you to look at, sort of how Canadian consumers are interested in travel and how travel is changing. And my last point is just a reminder about the destination management plan. We are very close to our final phase of that. This coming Monday, October 19th, is the visioning session. You'll see the draft plan. The entire public is welcome to attend. The session's from 1 till 4. Information on how to register for that webinar it's on our current haliburtoncounty.ca website. It's on our Facebook page. It's on Twitter. And folks will be able to vote along with some of our tactics as they are presented throughout the plan. As you know, this is continued work that we started really at the end of 2019 and throughout 2020 with those focus groups and the one-on-one sessions and a large survey of our stakeholders. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you very much for that very fulsome report. I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask, but I'll put it out to members of the committee first. Are there any questions or comments on anything that Amanda's presented so far from anybody? Brent's got his thumb up.
Yeah, just wonderful news. I know challenging times, but it's nice to see some wins with some losses, and it obviously our community is adapting to the times. And don't we all wish we had more staff to help us achieve things? But it gives me some optimism that the winter that's before us, 2020, 2021, and leading into next year, that we're headed in a positive direction, albeit a very atypical one.
It is indeed, and I would agree with that. One of the comments that I wanted to make was that where we are seeing more people staying here, there's a tremendous opportunity for folks who maybe haven't been here through the shoulder and off season or the winter season to have some great experiences they've never had locally before. So, if we can get folks out using trails, having experiences, doing a little bit more shopping, it's all those are wins again within our own community and for our community. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. I know you talked about the survey, and I suppose it totally depended on what kind of a business it was, right? To be whether you had a better year or not a better year. But 41% said that they had insufficient staff. I'm actually thinking it could have been higher. These are just the people who responded to the survey.
That's right.
Every business I talked to, whether it be a grocery store, anything on the main street, their biggest problem this year was finding staff to work. So I don't know if that was partly CERB or just we don't have enough people here, or I don't know what's going on, but it's just of note.
Thank you. Amanda, do you have anything to respond to that with? Do you have any insight there?
Just from speaking with stakeholders, business owners, it did sound like CERB did affect that. And I think just also the uncertainty around knowing when businesses could be open and the nature of certain businesses really rely on, of course, part-time employees. So being able to guarantee that, yes, you could work from, May to October was a little uncertain, of course, in March and April. So I think it's sort of a combo of CERB and then the uncertainty of how long they could retain staff for.
Warden Danielson.
I just wonder too if some of the inability to find staff is simply people's fear of putting themselves in an environment where they were at greater risk, or that's the way they perceived it to be.
Yeah, it could be. It could be easily that. I'm glad to see. Do you have the results yet, or are you going to share the audits or the audit result for Google My Business? Because I know I heard from an awful lot of people that there was a lot of challenges with the Google business listings keeping their hours current, especially when there were reduced hours. And I know a number of people who, went to Google for business hours and went in, put their mask on and went into town, only find the place had far less hours. So is there any way we can get better at that, of getting people to be more attentive to their Google business listings?
Yes. So Tom Lambert's really our team member who's the expert at Google My Business, and he's been reaching out personally on a regularly multiple times a week, I think, to our businesses to just remind them and insist them as well in how to update their hours and how to create. You can also put up some stories and some photos in your Google My Business listing. So we've been doing a lot of training on the other side of that, just to make sure that, yes, because what we do know is that people research the destination on their computer, but when they're in the destination, that's when they're looking and relying on Google. So we're working hard to make sure that those are all as up to date as possible.
Thank you. And my final question, which is actually more of it's kind of facetious, but have we heard any rumbling about any money from the Ministry of Tourism? I mean, the minister was here purportedly to make a big announcement, and we haven't seen it yet. So maybe the warden or the director have any comments on where our ministry money is?
Actually, it's interesting that you would say that, because I just wrote that down to follow up on exactly where we are with that.
Great. Thank you for that. Are there any other thoughts or comments, questions for Amanda on her work today? Well, Amanda, I'd thank you for letting us know all that good work, and I'd look for a mover and a seconder to accept this report. Councillor Burton and Councillor Kennedy, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that the County of Haliburton Committee of the Whole receives for information the September 2020 Tourism Department report.
You've heard that. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Madam Warden.
Thank you. Our next item of business is the procedural bylaw, and I believe that we would hear from our CAO about that.
Thank you, Warden Danielson. We are seeking direction on a number of different items that may result in changes to the procedural bylaw. The first one is actually with respect to Committee of the Whole. It was intended to be a one-year trial. If you'll recall, it from a staff standpoint, it seems to be working well, but we're seeking direction on whether or not we should be making that permanent. Did you want me to just pause there and see if there's specific direction, or?
Yeah, let's hear from members of council on your thoughts about Committee of the Whole. Seems to be working well. Councillor Burton and Councillor DeVolen.
That was my comment as well. It seems to be working very well, and I have absolutely no problem with carrying or continuing on with Committee of the Whole.
Councillor DeVolen.
I concur 100% with my colleagues' comments.
Councillor Roberts, let's hear from you.
I like it. Thank you.
Gosh, I thought you might say that. Okay, so it sounds, unless I hear any negative comments, it sounds like we're starting to catch stride with this, and it's working well. So carry on.
The second item is around Tourism Committee. We received a resignation from member Nibagon earlier this summer. It's one of those things where the conversation evolved as the director and I were discussing how we would advance the replacement process to council. We talked about the conversation that had occurred around the TripAdvisor marketing tactic, and there were many comments about the lack of balanced representation and the fact that the tourism community wasn't necessarily well reflected on our tourism committee. And so we started talking about what skill set would we be looking for, and should we identify it in a certain way. And the conversation then shifted to our destination management plan, and the fact that in the future we may not even know what governance model would work best to support the tourism infrastructure. And so that, I guess, combined with the fact that Amanda is attending the stakeholders meeting on a regular basis, on a monthly basis when they are meeting, and the fact that we have changed how we are meeting. We are doing this by Zoom, and it can be viewed either live or later on. The councillors obviously got, some members of council in particular received a lot of feedback through the TripAdvisor thing. So it is clear to us that there is a direct connection between our stakeholders and the tourism community and our members of council already when they want to provide input. So we're really just wondering if it would be best to move tourism items to Committee of the Whole, remove the public representatives on the committee that are there currently, at least until the destination management plan is complete and county council can review it after that.
Councillor DeVolen.
I concur with the recommendation. I think COVID and technology is changing how we do all kinds of things. And with respect to tourism, and we have a pretty diverse bunch of businesses and individuals that are created across the region, we're already tapping these forms of meetings to extend our reach. And I would like to go in that respect more wholeheartedly down the road with respect to that we use technology to allow engagements of larger groups of the public and those that are in the industry. And I think to have that come back, and that all of us as a committee of the whole has all of council into it, involved with it. To me, that's just a logical progression. Obviously waiting to see what, what the results of the other work that we have ongoing. But my personal opinion, I think it's a natural evolution, and will be able to reflect the interest of more people throughout the county if we go down this road.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat.
I would agree. And there's a lot of moving parts right now, including technology and COVID, and the stakeholder group is in flux at the moment as well, for a lot of reasons. And whether this decision is temporary or permanent, it does not preclude stakeholders from reaching out to their members of council at any time, as we have done in the past, and vice versa. I mean, we know who our go-to people are for all issues that face council. And I would hope that this allows for the fostering of a little more give and take and touch and go with stakeholders. Those relationships should be strong and should bring enough information to this table for us to carry on.
The one question that I would have, which would probably be to Amanda, would be that the stakeholders and the discussion that we had last year that suggested that there were some problems, that the stakeholders didn't represent everyone, and that there were starting to be some small, I don't want to call them splinter groups, but other groups forming with slightly different levels of interest. And I'm just wondering if there's any group that has been specifically identified, or if you're meeting with other groups. I just kind of was wondering about that, Amanda. I don't want to leave anyone out, and I know that there are other ways for us to gather information. I just kind of thought I should check on that.
Apologies, I missed part of that question as I was just coming back into the call, but I think I basically got it, is that are we keeping in touch with some of those folks and stakeholders who may have started to become kind of part of splinter groups, for lack of a better term? And I think the answer is yes. I think through the work that we've done through the destination management plan and all of that consultation and those opportunities there for all stakeholders to provide input publicly. And I think also just as a result of COVID, although as unfortunate as the situation has been, it has brought us, as I said in my report, a number of opportunities to really speak one-on-one with more stakeholders than really I think we ever have. So I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone, but I feel like stakeholders feel comfortable in reaching out to Eric or Tom or myself or all three of us, and certainly knowing that they can reach out to county council or request a delegation. I feel like it's opening the floor to more opportunity as we move forward.
Any other questions or concerns about the recommendation for the Tourism Committee? Okay, well, carry on then, Mike.
The next item is with respect to closed sessions, and we monitor the Ombudsman's annual report, and so we did notice a year or so ago there was a decision out of Enniskillen where the Ombudsman was suggesting and actually required in their case the municipality to provide some general detail, but more than just citing the section of the Act. Which is our practice. And so we are seeking direction on whether council would like us to do that and incorporate some wording like that in our procedural bylaw. The Ombudsman is now our closed meeting investigator. And so I guess the necessity to follow their protocols, I think, is probably heightened because of that. So we would certainly not make every effort not to divulge the confidentiality or the nature of and divulge any confidences, but they are suggesting that we provide some more information about why we are going into closed session.
Okay, thank you. Councillor DeBoll and then Councillor Roberts.
I guess I'd like to see some tangible, off-the-shelf kind of examples of that, how you expand that language other than the section and subsection of the act without in a small community tipping your hand about what the nature of it is. I'm not philosophically against doing this, but I'd like to see some real world kind of examples that and pull them out of the library of stuff that we've had through the county, and that just how you'd reframe that it wouldn't necessarily betray what we are talking about in closed session.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Roberts, then Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Councillor DeVol, and that's exactly what I was going to say. For instance, we now say something to the effect of or talk about an identifiable individual. Well, how would we expand on that more than saying so that I was going to say, could we see examples? Because I thought we already did state, we're going into for legal purposes or disposition or sale of land, and how can you say more than that? So,
Councillor Moffat.
I think the next item on our agenda is a good example of that.
It is. I was actually going to say that because it is expanded from what we might normally see. So what's your takeaway from that, Mike? You're getting concurrence on 2 of the items that you're proposing, but we need a little bit more information on the 3rd.
I think I would, I guess I would suggest that I would add some of those into a staff report that would accompany an amended procedural bylaw, and some of those examples in the report, and then I will include them in the draft, but highlight them. And then if council want those removed, we can certainly remove that at that point, and council could pass the bylaw as amended.
Okay, any other questions or concerns?
Could I just talk a little bit about something that isn't in the staff report, and that's around the warden's election. The COVID and the fact that we aren't able to meet necessitates a little bit of a change in approach. I guess my thoughts are that I would provide the nomination forms as normal at the October council meeting, but I obviously normally set those out on your table. I can't do that anymore, so I would propose to email those to you, and then those normally require the signature of a mover and seconder. I think that my sense is we need some flexibility around that. So if, as an example, if Councillor A were to seek to put their name forward, Councillor B could send an email to Councillor A saying, I support your nomination and I'd be prepared to move it. And then that could be an email that's attached with the nomination package to replace a signature. We are researching ways to look at doing the election itself electronically. I guess some of the key considerations that we're looking at, we want to ensure that the secrecy of the ballot. I think that's an important principle to maintain. And so one of the challenges with some of the electronic polling or election thing is you don't necessarily know who has voted. And it's important, like in any election, I know who has voted, but not how they have voted. So that's one of the challenges that we're looking, and Mike March is helping me with that. The other thing we want to make sure is that if we are using technology, that it's reliable. It would be an awful thing. There's enough pressure around an election. It would be an awful thing if somehow something crashed, or I had 9 votes and I couldn't figure out where the 9th one came from, or something like that. And then, of course, we're trying to balance that with cost. We hope that this will be a one-time thing and that it won't be necessary to do this anymore. So we've looked at some of the things that organizations like AMCTO have used and others, and there's a fairly significant price tag attached to those, and so we're taking all of that into account. But I guess I just wanted to let you know that those are things I'm thinking about. I hope to have a staff report on the council agenda in October with some suggestions, but on the election process itself. But The nomination forms I'm proposing to email out as normal.
Does that sound reasonable to everyone? And we look forward to a report at the end of the month. Thank you. Could I have a mover and a seconder to pass the motion regarding the amendments to the bylaw? Councillor Moffat, Councillor DeVolen. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor DeVolen. Be it resolved that the October 14th, 2020 procedural bylaw amendments staff report be received by Haliburton County Committee of the Whole, that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council direct staff to incorporate the amendments outlined in the report into the county's procedural bylaw, and that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council that Brandon Nimigon's letter of resignation from the Tourism Advisory Committee be accepted with regret, and a letter be sent to Mr. Nimigon thanking him for his service. And finally, that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council that letters of appreciation be sent to members of the disbanded Tourism Advisory Committee thanking them for their service.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. That concludes the open portion of our business. If I could have a mover and a seconder to go into close. Councillor Roberts, Councillor Burton. And I believe there will be a short break in the transition between open and closed. To the public, I just want to make a note that I did fail to ask council to vote on moving into closed despite there being a mover and a seconder to do so. So could I have a show of hands, albeit belatedly, to indicate support for having gone into closed? Thank you. Against? Okay. Thank you very much. Our business is now concluded. If I could have a mover and a seconder to adjourn today's meeting. Councillor Moffat and Councillor Kennedy. Thank you, everyone.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that the October 14th, 2020 meeting of Haliburton County Committee of the Whole now adjourned.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Bye now.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Guys.